Start streaming? Yes. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Hi. Should already be working. Why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? Why? Let's check Twitch. This it's working there. Yes, okay. So on Twitch it's working. Okay. Google should be working as well. Why isn't it working on SceneSet?
Gremlins. Video gremlins. They're everywhere.
It does say it's live. So... Fuck! What's up with SceneSet and Facebook?
Vote and live vote.
Yeah, don't forget to vote. It's important. So...
I already voted.
Vote again.
Such a drag.
You know, one thing that is interesting and that people aren't really exploring yet is making remote demo parties. Like, there used to be a lot of parties where you would submit remotely stuff and you would vote remotely and not actually attend the party. And nowadays you could do that with a live stream and just, you know, everybody watching the live stream of stuff that was submitted. And I have like live stream compos where we don't are actually physically somewhere, but we still see the compos together and discuss stuff. And I think that could be a lot interesting, and people aren't really organizing it.
As demo party organizer, I always hated remote entries. I mean, we always had a rule against them. The problem from our side was just that you just get some random demo, and it doesn't run on the compo PC. And you have nobody to contact, like nobody's answering.
Yeah.
It also just is kind of shitty at the prize giving.
Yeah.
And somebody wins, like, somebody else goes like, oh, I didn't actually write the demo, but I'm gonna collect the trophy, whatever. It's just...
It's for my friend.
Right.
Shit, what's the name? Yeah, John, that's it. I was forgetting s02e10's name, so he gave me a list of how to get stuff working on SceneSet. Should be working right now, but it's not. Welcome guys on the chat. Hey. People in the chat are saying that they're excited to see you, Daredevil, because they didn't know what you looked like apparently.
Very, very secretive, I guess. Well, this is my grown-up look. People probably haven't seen me since like 1995 when I had long hair and no kids.
You were a more respectable person.
Is a long time.
I'm trying to figure out if this is working or not on live on SceneSet. I have no idea. I have no idea. I know it's not working on Facebook, but it should. And I don't know why. Let's see. After you add it, you have to click activate. It was activated. I think. I hope. Oh, okay. Yes, so maybe that was that. Okay, and do I have to restart the streaming now, or will it just pop up on Facebook? Guess I have to restart the... Yeah, okay, so let's stop on SceneSet and restart, and hopefully it will work now. Let's see. Yep, yes. Okay. SceneSet and restart, and hopefully it will work now. Let's see. Yep, yes. SceneSet and restart, and hopefully yes, it will work now. Okay, little feedback there. Just testing the stream. Should be working fine now. So right now we should be streaming to Twitter, Periscope, to Twitch, to YouTube Live, to SceneSet, and SceneSet is republishing to Facebook Live. So yeah. And that feedback sound was the sound of Facebook not allowing you to mute when you try to preview your stream, in case you guys were wondering.
Nice.
Okay, and there was asking to add
there's no chance any of it was wrong, right?
I didn't get that. What did you say?
Just with that streaming setup, there's no chance any of that goes wrong, since it's just like republishing to 3 different things simultaneously.
Yeah, it's no chance of it going wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm using both Restream and SceneSet Live, so and they're restreaming to different things. So yeah, I just have to test everything. So Fistro
yeah,
by Devotion.
No, it was the assembly intro by Future Crew.
Ah, okay. Okay, there's a YouTube of that, so yeah, we can see that.
I think the first time I'll be seeing this probably in like 20 years.
It will bring back memories.
Yes.
Sorry guys, family stuff.
Okay, we should be aware that we are already streaming. So your words are now immortalized on the internet forever.
So I shouldn't. So is swearing allowed in this?
Yeah,
this
I don't
European,
mind.
So probably yes. Right?
Yeah. As we say,
no
fuck
FCC.
that shit.
Yeah, it has to be allowed. It has to be allowed. There's no FCC involved here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Fuckings go too.
Yeah. You're gonna keep the stream nice and R-rated.
Yep.
You got it.
So we have 10 minutes to go. And I'm going to skip the Archie demo because we already saw Archie demo last week. So I'm going to skip to something else, which we have not seen lately. I like this one in particular. It's Naughty by Nature. The group is called Nature. Mm-hmm. And I just love the name because it's like, yeah, you get the reference.
Yeah, we don't have to explain it. If you have to explain it, it's not funny.
Exactly, exactly.
And if they want to make another reference, they'll change their group name so they can make another funny joke.
Well, Nature's been around for a long time.
Oh, have they? My bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Old Amiga group. Well, at least since the 90s. I don't know if they're from the 80s.
Yeah.
Flashy Lamer is asking, why Facebook? Why? Because people use Facebook. I hate Facebook myself, but you know, if I publish there and I get 400 views, people realize that the show is happening, so more viewers is better for everyone. That reminds me that I haven't spammed it on the usual places yet, so let me announce that we are already streaming. Should probably go to IRC as well.
If you want to play anything post 2015, I'm all there, because after revision 2015 I kind of checked out.
Yeah, I don't think I've
That's all right. I
much.
checked out after like 1998. You know.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
So
The last demo party the last demo party I watched basically everything was Breakpoint 2010, but
Which is understandable.
yeah, after that just saw some of the major releases, but
I'm actually excited to see something that I haven't seen. So that'll be.
How's the scene in US right now? Like, you have 2 demo parties a year? Do you guys
Roughly 2.
Do you plan attending those or not really?
There's 2 or 3. I think in the last 12-month period, there is an average of Demo Splash, which is at Carnegie Mellon University, Synchrony, which is in New York, and At Party, which is in Massachusetts. And I believe they're all still going. Synchrony is the newest one. They all focus on different things. Synchrony is essentially one giant wild compo, in my opinion. I don't mean that as a slam, it just sort of is. And Demo Splash is, despite being run at a university with lots of young people, they tend to focus mostly on old school hardware, so that's mostly old school stuff. So it's At Party, that's like your typical party. Current state of the scene in North America is small. Most parties probably don't crack 100 people, but they're a fun time. So last one I was at was Synchrony, I think 1 year ago. But I no longer work for an airline, which means I no longer get flights for free. So the amount of demo parties I will be attending will be greatly curtailed by that.
Inverse Phase is saying on the chat that Synchrony is on a train. Yeah, I noticed that. Like, it connected New York to Montreal, was it?
The last one was. The previous 2 were not. Or 1.
That's an interesting concept, you know. You have stuff here, you have stuff there. Let's just make the party on the train.
Party train.
I'd be worried about crossing a border right now, though.
Well, you're an immigrant in the US,
citizen,
so...
or is it, yeah, as a US citizen or any citizen?
Both, I guess.
Speaking as somebody with a green card, my travel planning is currently
limited.
All about minimizing the number of times I enter or leave the US.
So if President equal Trump, Fabian is motionless.
Well, pretty much, yeah.
Just don't move around and you should be fine. Just wait 4 years and hope
I
he
mean,
doesn't
the
get
thing is-
reelected.
Still, yes.
I always get the hairy eyeball anyway. This is for, like, I look like some art school student, I guess. So the CBP officers think they got a pick on me.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Hey,
You're
I have
obviously a
beard.
terrorist.
I always get the pat down. I'm a beard. I got a beard. You know that I can't win.
Yeah,
either way.
you're Muslim, obviously. All people
that's
with
right.
beards are Muslims, and all
right.
Muslims are terrorists by default. Everybody knows that.
Yes.
So-
All of these things are true.
I used to get through pretty good, and then in 2010 I tried to take a USB microphone through security, and they
It's
don't
a
take
bomb.
kindly. Yeah, well, but it's a metal cylinder with a lot of electronics in it. So yeah, I got patted down immediately, and now I show up on lists.
Oh shit. That's
Nice.
that's just so fucked up.
I know.
Just don't leave the
good
country.
news
It's
is-
easier.
You also
Yeah,
ruin
well, that
travel
won't be
for
happening
probably
anytime soon.
100 other Jim Leonards out there. So you're not alone.
Luckily, the #1 search hit is some guy who was in the NFL, so I tend to duck under the radar.
Okay, 5 minutes left to go. We have time to watch one more demo, I guess. So I'll show you a new demo. It's another Rainbow Clash. And Daredevil, you should like this one, because it's really fresh and new and original.
Cool. It looks pretty cool. I'll watch.
I'm always down for Rainbow Clash.
Wow, this one's gonna give me a seizure for sure.
Yeah.
I should have taken something ahead of time. Could have been even more fun.
I think it was Breakpoint last year, where they had something like 5 or 6 either glitchy or just super fast-moving demos in a row. So the stream was just hilarious.
Yeah.
It's just
Macro
all-
blocks everywhere.
It was just low-res blocks. You couldn't see a thing. Like, there was the one still demo that was just black and white, high contrast pattern.
And with lines,
60.
yeah.
Yeah.
GL lines, that's the ideal way to kill the stream. Like
Yes.
shitloads of them.
Hardware encoder goes, I give up. That's it.
You have defeated me.
I had that trouble with the last Mind Candy. The oh shoot, what was it? It was the black and white demo with lots of lines, and at one point there's a this interfacing moire pattern, and then the encoder, every encoder was like, nope, they just noped out of there. It's the only part in the. It's a Blu-ray, and yet there are artifacts in it because no encoder could deal with it.
That's the thing. Like, I had the same thing with Daily Spam FX. This would have been 2006 or 7 or so when I was working on Capture.
Yeah.
And that just has a thing where it just does a bunch of high frequency flashing with lots of noise on top. You just can't. Like, that part just completely kills your bitrate budget for the next 5 seconds.
Yes.
It's just impossible.
Yeah, that's what demo
just
making's all about.
Manually.
That's right.
It's about trying to break everybody's hardware.
Yeah.
That's right.
Rick, do you know if there's anything like that would hijack the OpenGL GPU thing? Sort of like your capture thing, and stream that. So stream the actual information, and then you would on the other end recomposite it somehow using the OpenGL. That might be a nice workaround for.
You're talking like remote desktop for OpenGL, like send just the commands and stuff like that.
Yeah, that would be an interesting way to
I
stream
know
stuff.
for a fact that there's a startup that means to be doing this for game streaming.
Ah, nice.
They have talked to me and asked for advice on how to compress that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been on the other side of that, just looked at what the stuff that the driver actually does and how much data it gets, and just forget it.
Too
Oh,
much
really?
data.
Oh, even the command data is too big?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
We're
wow.
talking something like 20 to 40 megabytes per frame. So you're way better off just streaming the pixels.
I
Way
would have
better.
thought the textures would have been the problem, but wow.
I mean, it
Okay.
depends, right? But like, if you have actual stuff going on the screen, like, there's a lot.
Yeah.
It's just like whatever goes in the uniform buffers / constant buffers, and, the command data itself. There's texture uploads and so on when they happen, which when they happen are also super bursty. It's just bad news. It's just a lot of data.
Okay, that was an idea.
Yeah, I like the guy on the chat who flew with a homemade synthesizer. If you look at the picture, it's hilarious. I don't know how the TSA would ever let you on board with that thing, but it looks like something out of a movie.
Sounds like inverse phase.
That
Yeah.
might be why they let him fly. They look at it like, well, like,
This can't be real.
no terrorist would try to fly with something like this, right?
They're supposed to
Yeah.
camouflage the bombs, not have them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's now 9 o'clock on Lisbon time, so I think it's time for us to start the actual show. I'm gonna pause this for a second here. So, welcome to Mystery Demoscene Theater 9000, Season 2, Episode 10. Today we have a special episode with United States residents only, because we usually stream on Wednesdays, and it's a bit of a drag for US people to be able to attend us because of the time difference. It's around midday in US, is that correct? Right now?
Correct.
Yeah, so yeah. Usually whenever I ask people, oh, okay, do you want to be a guest and on Mystery Demoscene Theater, tell me, no, because I have work. I'm a working person, and I can't make it on a weekday, so we decided to do it on a weekend. And now all the situations are resolved. So for this special edition, we have with us Trickster of Hornet. You might know them from the Hornet archive, old stuff. You might know him from the DOS stuff with videos and 80 trickery stuff. And also, you're quite known for the Moby Gamer website.
Yes, I co-founded Moby Games in 1998.
Yeah. So he's also pretty famous for that. Then we have Daredevil of Renaissance, a true old-school PC guy. So, Daredevil, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I don't really know you personally, so share what you do. How did you get involved with this demo scene?
About me. Okay, well, these days that's nothing very interesting. You know, I just I work a regular day job, but I'm a software engineer, of course. So you have to kind of continue on with that stuff. But I don't know. Back in the old days, really all I was doing was running a BBS and taught myself how to code in C, and I really wanted to learn assembler, but I didn't know how to learn. So I happened to start talking to some guy on my BBS. This guy everybody knows as Tran, and caught him trying to download. I caught him trying to download mods off my BBS using LeechZ. So he was trying to scam me, and I caught him, and I was going to throw him out, but then we started talking, and the rest is history. So started coding in assembler, and he taught me a lot. I mean, we used to sit on the phone for hours, and just this was before the internet, so just sit on the phone. This was
like in '89 or?
Yeah, I'd say like 1990 maybe. It's very hard to even imagine back then, but yeah, no, I think I was probably like. I don't know, 16 years old and sitting there just in my room in the dark and trying to learn how to code, and assembler was so much more interesting than C. So started to get there, but then we went back the opposite way, right? Because we were doing everything in assembler. I was like, wow, this is too much work. I just want to go back to doing everything in C.
Yeah.
Now I code in Python, so it's easier. But everything's there already for you. But anyway, kind of seeing those old demos, just people uploading my BBS, and I was like, I don't want this crap. I only want mods. And then I started watching them. I was like, hey, this is cool. These are interesting. So what is this that people are doing? And that's where I think I got into. I'd seen Chronologia from Cascada, and then Fishtro, and from Future Crew, and that was kind of the beginning.
Okay. Let me just quickly introduce Rig. Rig is from farbrausch. Right. He's one of the makers of the Werkzeug tool. He did Crunchy. He did Capture. Is this how you?
You don't pronounce the double K. It's just K.
See, that's how the Germans trick you. They put these things. They put dots and double Ks, and you're not supposed to say anything of that.
Oh, come on. We could have gotten away with that excuse 10 years ago, maybe. But now that every startup just drops random vowels, you have no excuse. It's not just us anymore.
I apologize. You are correct.
We were ahead of the wave.
That's right.
What other stuff were you involved? You were involved with trackers earlier on, or the Cubic Replay?
Cubic Player, so mod player.
Yeah. Which was pretty famous at the time. And nowadays you're working for, what's the name of the company? I forget.
Red Game Tools.
Red Tools, yeah. Yeah, so okay, let's get started. I guess we'll start with Trickster, since you're the person more on the left. So Trickster, tell us, how did you get into the demo scene?
How I got into the demo scene? Cracking games in the 80s, and never put it together that the cracktros were, more than just something simple. And then finally, I think I grabbed Space Pig's Mega Demo, which I see we're watching now, off of BBS in, I want to say it was maybe 3 days after it was released. So this was like late December 1990, I think it was.
Almost 0 day.
Yeah, and almost 0 day. And which was actually quite a feat, considering that I was based in Chicago, and these guys are based in Sweden. And somehow it made it across good old FidoNet, and I was just entranced by the whole thing. It was like a game, but it wasn't a game. And how was my Sound Blaster producing multiple voices? I mean, I had seen that before with Track Blaster, if anyone remembers that old mod player. Mm-hmm. But to see amazing visuals that ran at the full frame rate and have multiple voices, that was it. I just had to figure out, I had to grab everything else that was called a demo. And in 1991, you got a lot of like product demos and BBS demos and stuff, but eventually you grabbed enough of the demo scene, you started figuring out, for an American anyway, there's this whole thing over in Europe where, you know, they don't, the major skill isn't cracking the games, it's this stuff. And I just was fascinated by it. I'd always, since the early 80s, I'd always been fascinated with using computers as some sort of a sound tool. And so this, you know, without any additional hardware, like how clever could you be getting a computer to produce audio? So this is what was a natural extension.
And this, at the time, there was very high thing for the BBSs, which nowadays they're only ran like through telnet shells, just for nostalgia's sake. But at the time, this is like early 90s, there was a very big BBS scene, and I heard a lot that there were quite many BBSs in the US, but they were focusing more on cracking and piracy and stuff like that, and not really Demoscene stuff.
Yeah, every BBS had a hidden board for piracy, and so that was pretty much it. You know, the gateway drug was mods or GIFs or something like that, or porn, and then, you know, once you unlocked the game piracy, that was where the actual action was. But yeah, and it was it was frustrating as an American to try to follow the scene because, again, most of this stuff was in Europe. You know, that's why I was so happy to see, I'm trying to remember the timeline, but Charles made me remember, wasn't there a couple of sound-oriented BBSs and where this stuff would kind of overlap? I think that's how I originally found Renaissance Productions, where you would call a couple of BBSs that were all about producing music or sound on the PC, and then because, you know, demos did cool stuff with sound, that's how you got them. But yeah, that was I'm trying to remember, like, the sound and music BBS or some other stupid name.
There were a few floating around that started specializing in that sort of thing, and then my BBS in the beginning also focused on wares, so I switched completely over at that point. I was like, it got so big that I didn't even have hard drive space to store wares anymore, so it was just like, all right, it's just going to be mod files and demos now.
Was there a big crack on piracy at the time? Like, because I remember here in Portugal we just swapped discs, and I never had a BBS connection. When I got a modem, I went directly to the internet, so I skipped all the whole BBS thing. So I'm always curious on how it actually was. Some people tell me there was free piracy everywhere, but then all of a sudden they started cracking on it, and then it just, everything disappeared, and everyone went to internet after that.
I'm curious to hear Charles's perspective, but my perspective is that in the 80s, everybody was trading stuff, and then occasionally you would hear, or in one case, witness, I actually saw this, like 5 feds come in and confiscate all the equipment. So that was interesting, and I never talked to that guy again. Because I don't want any part of this. But it was, you would go into a BBS, there's the normal stuff, you'd chat up the sysop if he was online, which is like a one-to-one person chat over IRC. And then it wasn't over IRC, it was like as if you were on IRC with a personal chat. And then you'd be like, hey man, what do I do to get the wares? Like, and then you'd try to butter him up like, well, I've got stuff to contribute, do you have this, do you have that? And sometimes you'd be lying out your ass, but you'd do anything you could to unlock the special, you know, the hidden file
to get access.
And then occasionally a lot of my early, I cracked some stuff in the late 80s, but I wasn't very good at it. I was actually much better at social engineering sysops to get to get access between different BBSs. So I would go into a BBS, see what they needed, go to some other BBS, grab it, put it here, and then like get my ratios up and up. And so that's how it happened. But that really did all stop like in '91. Like I saw demos and I was like, holy crap, that is way more effort and way cooler than playing yet another Sierra game or something. So
well, I think that's the same thing for me. Is like I was my whole motivation was just downloading games and stuff for free because I didn't have any money as a teenager. But once I got into this, I was getting people to upload mods for wares. So I would give them the wares, and I would take the mods. But it got to the point where it's like, all right, I have everybody. Now it's getting where there's demos and mods, and the wares just went out the window. I didn't want to take that risk anymore. And it's funny because I actually did have the Secret Service came to my house one time, but they actually called ahead first. They were very nice.
Just to let you know, you should clean up a little bit before we arrive.
It's incredibly silly, but I found it. So when they came, I was so scared. I was like hiding my hard drives, burying them in the yard, wondering what was going on. And it really, what it turned out at the end of the day was they were investigating the Unabomber, who at this point in the U.S. they hadn't caught this guy yet, who was bombing all over the place. And it turns out they were the initials FC on a lot of the bombs that they had, packages they had found, and they thought Future Crew and FC were related somehow. And since I was distributing stuff for Future Crew on SBS, they came and talked to me. And once I found out about it, I just laughed. It was such a joke. It was funny. But at the time, I was like, I was scared shitless. I was like, they're gonna come.
The Demoscene is related to the Unabomber.
Yes. So anyway, it was they were trying everything they could to catch this guy, and so it was just a complete stab in the dark, you know, like, but it was, to me, it was no joke. But I was like, you know, usually the feds don't call ahead when they come and take your stuff. So but,
that story did not go the way I expected, though. It's like, I thought they were gonna bust me for wares, and that was just like this big panic. But once I figured out they were only trying to link me to some terrorism incident, it was fine.
Yeah, well, because I knew that I didn't do that. I couldn't say the same about the wares.
It was a different time.
The biggest trouble I got into was with my mom. Like, she's like, "Why is the Secret Service at the door?" I was like, "Oh my god."
What we're watching right now, to go back on track with the thing, is a report from Nade95, which apparently was the first American demo party. So, were you guys there? What was it like?
We were there. It was like it was the type of feeling where you could go into a room and drop a Shade Bob joke and everybody would know what you were talking about, which had never happened. It was amazing to have all these people in one place, and being able to stay up all night and sleep whenever you want. You know, I'll never forget it. It was life-changing. I wish I could describe it with better words than that, but it's probably how how most demo parties were. There wasn't a lot of game trading, though. I think unlike a lot of early demo parties, this one really was more focused toward just demos, and then they did have some gaming, but it was off to the side and like cordoned off, and you know, weren't allowed to mix with the demo sceners. So
no, they were.
I thought it was, you know,
what do you remember?
The funniest things about that was, it was my first experience. I took the train up from New York, so it was like a 10 or 12-hour train ride. I don't know, I can't remember. It was before the days of camera phones and internet, and so you basically have to entertain yourself on the train for all that time. I couldn't even imagine doing that today without my iPad or something. But it's sad because there aren't a lot of pictures from this, at least not on digital. You know, no one had a digital camera at that time, so whatever's around is film. But it was a lot of fun. I do remember sleeping on the floor, and I do remember drinking Mountain Dew like crazy, and then finding out there's no caffeine in it in Canada. So
and
are you kidding me?
And thankfully Nate both times offered to have Subway cater, so I ate like maybe 17 Subway sandwiches because I didn't want to leave the place, and it was a combination of I don't want to miss anything and I don't speak French. So
it was in a part of Quebec that like there was nobody spoke any English there.
Yeah, Longueuil, I believe.
How did they decide to organize this? Did you guys knew the organizers at the time? Like, there's no demo party records here in Canada. Why organize a demo party?
I remember speaking to Med and one of the other guys. They did a presentation on demos as some sort of school project. This is a school, as you can tell, and then they just decided, let's organize a party, and they got school credit for it. So there was a little bit of a motivation to do so. But both times they were, and the reason there wasn't an 897 is because they were out of school.
That's pretty cool. So was that your first demo party for both you guys, Nate?
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was good. It had. I mean, I've only been to one proper Euro party, but that party was Revision. So if I had to pick only one to go to, that's the one. I would say Nade was like half the size of Revision. There were about 900 people the first one and 1,000 people the second one. Now again, there's a small contingent of that, maybe 100 or so that were gamers, but yeah, they really were all, because one of the things that might not be
numbers.
Well, it was. Well, because
I was gonna say,
also,
that's more than half the size of Revision.
Revision. I thought Revision was like 2,000 people. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway.
Wait. That's the press release numbers and there's the actual numbers. The press release numbers are usually inflated.
Oh, okay. Well, the numbers that I don't know if they're inflated or not. I heard it was 900 people total for Nade, and then 1,000 for the second one. But one of the reasons it was so inflated is that it wasn't just demo people. It was also tracking scene people. America had a gigantic tracking scene, huge. And I'm not necessarily going to say that the quality was also that huge, but the participation certainly was. And so a lot of the people who showed up at Nade were there for the music, for the music competitions and the music stuff. That had a bit of a side effect. In the first Nade, they didn't do any pre-selection of the music, and so
had like 80 tracks.
More. It was like 100. I'm not kidding. And so Snowman, myself, and a couple of, and like maybe 4 other people were music judges. And at the end of 6 hours, it was just me and Snowman finishing up the very last ones. And they played this on the big screen. So after a while, people were like sick and tired of hearing it's a varying quality. And,
I think the other side effect was that there weren't a lot of demos, so we had that's kind of how that was how Pistro came about. I don't remember if that was in. I think that was in '96. I don't know if it was '96 or '95.
I think it was Pistro was
'96.
It might have been, but that was the problem. Is there was a lot of music, but not as much on the demo side. But I think I'm impressed by the amount of and the quality of the things that came out, given that the scene was so small here.
It's very interesting because nowadays people don't really use mods anymore at all. It's like it's becoming an obsolete format. There are still some trackers around, and there's still saves as, but most people, they just do MP3s, and there is a whole SoundCloud scene. That it's not the tracker groups that we used to have. So it's very interesting, especially how big it was in the US compared to Europe.
I think though that's kind of exciting though, because when I think about all the trackers were a lot of fun, but the fun of the tracker was trying to make it sound sometimes either like real music, where you're trying to make it actually sound real in this thing that's completely unwieldy, and you have to it's like coding music, right? And so that kind of part about it was kind of fun, but at the same time, if you wanted to make real music, you were so limited. So I kind of like the idea that now you have the option of doing either. Which is so cool, because I mean disk space is a non-issue anymore. Memory is a non-issue, and I think that's
that was really the thing, right? With MP3, you could suddenly do like a 3-minute track that was 3 megabytes,
right?
And before your mod for the same length would be maybe whatever 700, 800K. And that wasn't that big a gap anymore. But WAV files, especially in the 90s, it's just like, no, I don't have that kind of distance.
There's no way to
need to send it on the internet.
That's right.
So what we're watching right now is Explicit by Hornet and OTM. Was this your first demo, Trickster?
No, the first one, I mean, well, proper demo in a competition, yes, this was my first one. And I am going to immediately give most of the credit to Fred of OTM. Most of this engine is his. I'd say 95% of all the 3D stuff is rasterized by his engine. I only did a couple of things. I did the refraction thing previously, which was just inverting the normals. It wasn't a big deal. And but I did design and put together the whole thing. So the design of the demo is mine, and all the video stuff is mine, 100%.
I will say that this history part is one of my favorite parts of any demo. It's just it's just such a cool idea.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And it was also an excuse to show off every last square inch of Fred's engine. But actually, Fred coded something new for this, and I think it comes up after this history part where it's texture mapped, shaded, transparent stuff with different textures and so forth.
Glens.
So we'll see that. Possibly textured glens, possibly. But yeah, so this was my first, and there's 2 times during a demo party, both at Nade actually, where you finally get why you're doing some of this stuff. Okay, yeah, this was it. It was, I think both of these go texture. Yeah, there we go. And I wrote my meager contribution to this was the motion blur shader. I wrote pipeline UNV pipe. Rag's laughing. Motion blur for this, proper motion blur. Anyway, two instances where it's like you finally understand not only a sense of community but sort of a sense of awe and why you want to do this stuff. In the first NAID, we took a break and we grabbed I think it was the Gathering winner, which was, oh god, very famous, Dope by Complex.
Was it Dope?
Yeah, it was Dope. And we
I remember that.
We played that in the big.
Was snickering.
We
Because
played
their motion blur was terrible.
Oh, I know. It was.
The
It
one I
was.
think
Mine
of.
is. Yes, mine was not nearly that bad. Dope was. So we played it on the big screen, massive volume, and everything around us just kind of stopped. And it wasn't like depression, like, oh, the Europeans can beat us no matter what. It was more like just in awe of something that can be created on what at the time was commodity hardware. So this is all mine. So I'm happy about this part. And by the way, the HTV logo is just simply covering up the actual MTV logo of the footage. It's for real. So that was NAID 95, and then 96 when I saw this demo, my own demo on screen, and everyone was like silent because some of the pause, I didn't have timing down, and so I didn't quite get, how the flow of a demo and how you're supposed to give like a little bit of time for audience reaction and things like that. But at the it ends very quickly, and once it ends here, there's like a picture, and then it cuts out, and then it fades to black. And I remember the whole place exploding and like thunderous applause, like, oh gosh, they did like it. And so I love that. So, trying to chase that down is what eventually led to Revision 2015. But we can talk about that later.
That's always been my one of my favorite parts about doing demos. Like, there's an initial part where people are just silent, just watching, like, rolling with it and see what happens. And if you can ever get to a place where, like, 1 or 2 minutes in of maybe a 5-minute demo, like, people start applauding at individual scenes,
Yes,
you done well.
My goal since NAID has been to primarily try to make my friends laugh, and so that's what I've done in a lot of productions. And my best compliment was when some Polish guys at Revision screamed at the top of their lungs, "You fuckers! You fuckers!" like constantly. They were seeing what was on the screen. I was like, "Yes, I finally made it. I pissed somebody off."
Yeah, you got cursed at.
No!
That's what you needed.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of my goal at the end of demo making time, like when I started to get busy with life and everything. But I just wanted to make demos that were fun. Like we were talking about Nothing on the music disc before, and it was just fun. Like, we just had all these animations that were funny, and it's like Beavis and Butthead, and they're all watching. They were watching music. So it was fun, and Pistro was just the ultimate in stupid
Silliness.
fun. We'll probably get to that one later, but that's what it was all about. I think we just wanted to have a good time and play around with this stuff. And
that's the spirit of the demo scene. You do stuff for fun. Then you can explore the technical aspect, but most of all, you like to have fun.
It was fun, but I think it got, for me anyway, I felt like it got to a point where it started to get really serious for a while. Everyone was trying to really, like, seriously outdo everyone else. The competitiveness was very, very high. And I don't know, I feel like it got not as fun for me anymore.
That's when you should do more silly stuff.
Yeah, well, that's why I did more silly stuff, but I feel like now it's great because now I can watch stuff and I'm not involved in it, so now it's a lot more fun. I don't have to do it, but I feel like I want to kind of do it again. It would be fun to do that, but it's hard when you have kids and family and life and all that. So
to properly plan a Renaissance comeback. Going back to Trickster for a moment. Trickster, you've been doing a lot of, since the 90s, you've been doing a lot of video stuff for DOS. So can you explain to us about your obsession of having video playing on DOS? And what this thing is that we're watching now?
Well, this thing that you're watching now is Jim came up with an S3M loader for a mod library that I was playing around with, and also some video stuff. And I had a cheap digitizer at the time, which you can clearly see the quality of in the accompanying production. It was just sort of like, realizing that most dance mods are 4 on the floor, 64 row stuff, and and so I figured out, well, heck, if I just simply handcraft all of the video sequences to that exact same time base, it would be
On sync.
You know, it would be effortless to sync them. And so, hey, what would a syncing video player look like? And so that's what this is. And this was probably my first real foray into assembler as well, because we had to. I worked on this actually with the person that I co-founded Moby Games with. His name is Brian Hurt, and he wrote, I think, the first iteration of this video stuff, and then I think I optimized it a little bit. I'm trying to remember now. It's a long time ago. We actually worked on after this, we worked on a proper demo, but we never finished it. I think I have video of that up somewhere. It essentially was very derivative of Panic, because we really loved Panic. So and then we never finished it, and we're like, well, the world doesn't need a bad clone of Panic. So, but
there is this party in I believe in Germany where they accept entries that were never finished. So that might be a good contribution for that compo.
Got lots of those.
Yeah, and it's also like 70 seconds long, so and 2 effects. So,
but you kept working on video stuff because after
after
your 10-year break.
Yeah, after my break, I came back with video stuff. Yeah, Homer is Brian Hurt there. I don't know why. I've always been sort of somewhat obsessed with video stuff on low resource platforms. It seems, for me, it's like a combination. It's like a perfect merging of sound and video and optimization and cleverness, because you can't just, it's not like I wrote an MPEG player for DOS for an 8088. I had to come up with an entire video system. And it's like you start with what you have and you reverse engineer backward. Okay, what's possible? And then is it possible to represent video? I mean, what we're looking at now, it's like, oh, look, it's video and text mode. It is. I suppose,
but it's not possible to run on the 8088.
But it is possible, because I benchmarked. I used the timer to benchmark exactly how long it took to move 4K of which is 40 by 25 text mode to video RAM, and how much time I had left over and what would be feasible. You just work this stuff out. If you want to be, if I want to make myself sound more awesome, I could say that this is in fact a vector quantization code.
A vector quantization,
with a fixed code book. So because it is, I was limited to 16 colors and the DOS and the ROM character set. So that's
when this came out in 2004. You had like a huge number of thumb ups on Poet. For everyone was really impressed. First, that Hornet was actually back, because most people know Hornet for the Hornet archive. They don't know Hornet for making demos. At least the European people. I guess on the US they know your demology a bit better.
I did. Hornet had a grand total of 2 demos before this, and it was Explicit, which we just saw, and it was. I think it was, I don't remember what it was called, but we had 2 new members in the group, and it was just a very quick intro showing those 2 new members, and of which all dropped out 6 months later, so it was all kind of silly. But no, you're right. Hornet, as a demo group from '92 to '97, was primarily responsible for being managing the Hornet archive, which was the nexus on the internet for uploading and downloading demos and demo-related things, source code and trackers and stuff like that. Someone has to do the dirty work, and we were okay at making demos, but we were much better at managing a site and coming out with a newsletter every couple of weeks, demo news and stuff like that. So that's what we did. Yeah,
demo news. Demo news was what inspired me to do Demo Journal later on. After,
cool.
So yeah, and I had a lot of people who were still calling Demo Journal Demo News, because it's the name that really ringed in their head. So they're like, I really like Demo News that you do. I don't do Demo News, I do Demo Journal. It's different. It's different people.
It's too many syllables.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then scene.org fired up, I think in late '96 or early '97, and we were all trying to move on with our lives, and so we were like, you know what, we'll just pass the torch, which we did, and we're very happy that that's lasted for 20 years, and they've done an utterly fantastic job. And
your archive is still quite useful, because your archive, you still find stuff on your archive. Yeah.
Back then back then the scene was small enough and the uploads were small enough that we could actually curate stuff, and so we'd rate and review things and give it stars and small descriptions and things like that. So the Hornet archive is still up, hosted by scene.org. Again, thank you guys. And you can search for scene history through actual like Google searches now, like the actual, instead of having to try to grab everything and parse through the file.diz.
There is a question on the chat asking how did the collaboration with Phoenix start?
Oh, for this specific thing? So you're looking right now at Intro Junior, which is a PC Junior demo, and I think it's the first. I could be wrong about that, but one of the things also that I've liked doing is world firsts, because the only way to impress people and make your friends laugh is with world firsts. So this is a PC Junior demo that does 60. You can't tell from the stream, but it's doing 60 hertz raster bars, 60 hertz scrolling on the bottom, and then 60 hertz music updates, and then there's finally time to do about half a screen's worth of non-60
I don't even know what a PC Junior is.
A PC Junior is what IBM came out with after the first PC. Do you know what a Tandy 1000 is?
Yes, a Tandy I've heard of.
The Tandy they're the same. The Tandy 1000 was actually a clone of the PC Junior. So 16 colors, 3-voice sound, and slow as hell. And in fact, having a machine this slow with this many colors is actually a detriment because it's now twice the amount of video memory to sling around. So one of the things that I also did for this demo was I banged on the video registers and discovered a 160 by 100 by 16 color mode with a linear memory organization. And so that's another thing that made this possible. So real easy to mess with the graphics. So so how did it come together with Phoenix? Phoenix and I met at NAID 95, I'm pretty sure, and then at the end of NAID 96, we asked him to join Hornet, and he did, and he primarily helped out with the running of the Hornet archive, and he and I have just always stayed in contact and stayed friendly, and we see each other at American parties whenever we can.
Because you guys don't live close together.
No, we do not. He lives, oh God, he's going to kill me. He lives in... Oh, he lives close to He lives close. I think he lives in Massachusetts or very close to it. And I'm very sorry, Andy, for forgetting where you live.
U.S. is very big. We can't remember all the names of all the lands.
Yeah, but no, he did. He composed this music in. I figured out it was real easy to play VGMs, and rather than try to adapt Monotone, which is a tracker I wrote for the PC speaker, over to supporting 3-voice, I just told him to compose it in something like either Mod to PSG or Deflamask. And he did it in Deflamask and exported a VGM, and then I wrote a very simple VGM player for the PC Junior. So that's what's happening. PC Junior has an actual video retrace interrupt, although I'm not using it because it fires at the very bottom of the screen, and I wanted it to fire at the very start of overscan. So I actually am not using some PC Junior features in that. But vertical retrace, hardware vertical retrace interrupts are awesome. I suppose if I were a Commodore person, I'd be laughing right now because I believe they have horizontal retrace interrupts, which are also awesome.
It's configurable. You can
configurable?
just set the raster position where you want the interrupt to fire.
Oh my God! The demos
you can change that mid-frame.
So jeez!
Compares every scan line. So that scan line and set up the interrupt for the next time you want to do a raster.
Commodore people, it's so easy. Well, and that was sort of the joke in the beginning part of what we're watching now, which is 80 miles per hour. Yep. Commodore people have it so damn easy, so it's so hard to do something on the PC. You have to do it all in software. I guess this is the same argument Atari ST people had with the Amiga. Same CPU, but you got to do everything yourself. I could just start talking about 80 miles per hour and how. Okay, wait, you want me to just keep talking? I guess
Please
I can just keep talking.
Please
all right,
do.
here I go. So 80 miles per hour started because our artist had worked with one of the other programmers, Rian Igny, a programmer, his real name's Andrew Jenner, had figured out some per row retriggering of graphics mode. So normally you can't just, normally on CGA you tell it which start address to start displaying memory from, and then that's it. But he figured out a way to retrigger it. And then we also figured out that I keep saying we. Demo's going faster than I can explain it.
I can pause it. Hold on.
No, it's cool. It's so the artist Weiler worked with the programmer Rian, and they came up with this utterly amazing video mode where they had discovered that the CGA does not disable color burst in 80-column text mode. In fact, okay, this is good that you didn't pause it because we're here now. This was my joke. I thought we start with the crappy colors, and then we start with the text colors, and now we display a Commodore palette to freak people out, and then finally we go to that image, and I saw that image, and I was like, "That's it. We got to make a demo. This is. I've never seen anything so amazing." So the secret behind that mode is that it's actually a tweaked text mode with the color burst still turned on. This was a design flaw that the designers of CGA forgot to take out, and so that's what enables those colors. So.
Let me pause here for a second because I want to ask a question. There's something very specific about CGA because it has 2 different output modes. Can you explain a little bit about that?
All right. So CGA has So stock CGA, as purchased in late '81 or I think early 1982, it is a 16K RAM card with enough. That's enough RAM to display 1 page of typically 320 by 200 by 4 color graphics in RGB mode. Or you can display roughly 160 by 200 by 16 colors in composite mode. So on the back of the card, there's 2 jacks. There's a standard, Commodore 128 people would know this as an RGB jack, which displayed your 16 text colors in text mode super sharp on an actual monitor. I don't know if you can see it back there. There's an actual CGA monitor. And then there was also, for people who couldn't afford the monitor, a composite output jack, so you could hook up a TV. And so that's essentially it. So
which looks a lot better, but most people didn't have.
Well, it's a lot better, but you lose resolution. And since the IBM was predominantly a business machine, international business machines, most people didn't explore that, except for the game programmers. However,
and even most games, they only used one of the modes. Like from what I read, there are very few games who actually either support both or they were aimed for this higher quality.
Yes, and there were no. I mean, this wasn't a documented standard. You can display when you actually display graphics out the composite port, depending on the palette you select. If you're in graphics mode, depending on the palette you select and the border color you select, the color palette is completely different. So, if you saw anything at all, you probably saw them go into 640 by 200 mode, which is black and white. Leave the border, leave the palette at full white, leave the border at full black, turn on the color burst, and then that's the color set that most everybody worked with because it was consistent. But yeah,
Phase on the chat is saying that composite CGA was good in the Sierra games. That's what he remembers of composite CGA.
So yes, actually, before King's Quest actually used the PC Junior's true 16 color mode, Sierra explored using composite color to do 16 colors. When they would write a game for Apple, and then they would port it over to the PC, and then they found they could get more than 4 colors if they used the composite output port. So in early Sierra games, you actually have this keyboard toggle. Actually, in later Sierra games too, you have a keyboard toggle to toggle between 4-color cyan, magenta, horrible palette stuff on your monitor, and then you toggle it, and then you get a lower res but much more colorful output on the composite output port. That's CG in a nutshell. So that's cool.
There's another question.
There's a lot that sucked about CGA. I could tell you that. I mean, hopefully, telling you what sucked about it makes the demo a little bit more appreciable. First of all, there's only enough video RAM. I really want to stress this. There's only enough video RAM for 1 page. So anytime you see anything scrolling or something that looks flicker-free, just try to imagine how we did this with only 1 video page. And a lot of it involved monitoring the timer to see where the raster was by polling the timer. We didn't have an interrupt for it, but we could watch the timer and figure out, okay, it's here, now we can do something. Also, yes, there's a character set, but it is not redefinable, unlike pretty much every single other system. So if we could do a cool effect in text mode, we had to work with the existing text mode font. We couldn't redefine it. So keep those in mind. If anyone ever looked at miles per hour and thought that's a piece of crap, well, just try to keep that in mind, because it was
try it yourself, buddy.
Yes.
See how well you make it. There's another question on the chat which was asking if the IBM Bobs effect, I'm sorry, I said boobs instead of bobs, my bad,
was
it inspired from the IBM Atom picture? I don't know why the IBM Atom picture. I hope you do.
The IBM Atom picture? I don't.
I guess it's picture of an atom.
No, okay, no, I think I know what they mean. I think they're talking about the fact that IBM came up with a way to actually physically rearrange atoms and have it also be controllable and also viewable through an electron microscope. They arranged atoms into the letters IBM. I could lie and say yes, but that's not what happened. We wanted to come up with a Bob's routine. We had time to fill in the demo, and Scully wrote the Bob's routine, which was initially a test of his compiled sprite routine. And we were figuring, well, what do we, he's like, I can do about 32. And we ended up arranging at 30 frames a second. So we ended up arranging 30 of them into the letters I, B, and M.
Okay.
So no, it was not based on the Atom thing, but I cannot lie.
Okay, on with the demo then.
On with the demo, go ahead. Okay, that's playing now. This star field is very busy because it's a crazy amount of stars. This is actually a general purpose routine that can move the dots in any order, but we chose a star field because all classic demos have to have a star field. The coolest one was all of them moving in a spiral and disappearing into the center, but we went with the star field anyway. So this is a compiled sprite routine where we are very carefully changing when the raster is past where we're updating.
You're going back to the future.
Yes, exactly. And then this part, this is a Scali code of this, and I love this. I love how this turned out. I love the sprite compiler did transparency perfectly. I love Amir's art. That art is amazing for fuzzy composite CGA.
IBM Bobs.
Yes, actual Bobs. Kind of wish we could have had this moving around, but we ran out of time at the party. We were going to have it move around, but then we'd have to change which rectangle we were erasing and whatever. It was quick, and we ran out of time. That's my excuse. This was mine. Very proud of it. So again, this looks like 16 color text mode. It is a text mode based effect, but it's actually using a tweak text mode. You can see the snow in the left column. That's because when you on original IBM CGA, when you write, if you try to write to memory at the same time the card is reading it, the card reads garbage, and so that's what we call snow. So that got a big reaction from the audience. I was really happy with that. And then this picture too. Actually, this picture and the 1000 color picture. It was when I saw the both of these and I realized that this kind of stuff was reproducible. I started gathering together the people I thought that could make this demo. So there it is. I love that picture.
Is that original artwork?
Okay, I gotta say something about that picture. I said, how did you code it if there were no tools? And he said, well, at one point Excel was used. And I never asked him how he used a spreadsheet to make the picture, but part of his workflow was using a spreadsheet.
Calculating stuff,
I
guess.
If you ever talk to C64 artists, like if they do any of the crazy full screen pictures, that stuff, like just you see a C64 demo, they just show a picture and you go, oh, whatever, it's just playing a picture.
But it's doing all this other stuff.
Well, by this point, if you see it in a AAA C64 demo, that stuff is crazy as well. Because they do all kinds of tricks. They have
can you pause it here?
Colors they can use block. They paste sprites over specific parts.
I know.
So they can put extra detail where they need to. They have put extra sprites in the border so they can actually do a larger, like, overscan image. And then they have lower res in the borders because they have to stretch the sprite to make that fit and so on. It's completely crazy.
It is pretty crazy. So it's like they're painting the picture mostly, well, I shouldn't say mostly, but at least half with code. And I love that. I love programmer and artist, merged together trying to do something that's more than 320 by 200 on a C64. I'm totally with you on that. I just wanted to pause it real quick because this is also one of the cooler parts of the demo in that not only is it typical Kefren's bars, garbage truck's going to get mad at me for calling them Kefren's bars.
Alcatraz bars.
Alcatraz bars, thank you. I call them you have to understand, I call them Kefren's bars for like 25 years, so I'll call them.
You and a lot of people.
All right.
Yes.
So not only we brought in another member of Rianigni's group, and I forget his name. I'm so sorry. And he did the cool pre-calc of the sign and the colors, but the actual effect. One of the things that makes this nearly impossible is that the PC has RAM that is actually dynamic RAM that has to be refreshed. You have to spend a little bit of time every couple of cycles to read from it or write to it to charge it, to keep it charged and hold its contents. We found, and we were running into issues where we couldn't do such a cycle exact effect like this because the DRAM refresh was getting in the way. And then we found that if we relaxed the DRAM timing a little bit, like made it slower, we could get all the cycles to line up and somehow not lose memory contents while we were doing it. So so this effect runs on most IBMs and it doesn't run on most compatibles because they use cheaper DRAM that lose their memory faster when you don't refresh them enough.
On the chat, they're saying that maybe it's Pupe of CRTC. The person you were mentioning?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, feel free. Go ahead. I won't make it. I won't make you pause anymore.
Okay, let's keep playing then.
So the reason I'm also going into this is because everyone participating in this show is a coder. So I thought I'd mention the coder-specific stuff that might make it entertaining. Oh, and this is Scully's 3D part. So these objects don't move around side to side too much, but what we were trying to do with this 3D part is that we have one video page, and we were trying to update as quickly as possible. So what this looks like your typical rasterizer where you erase everything and then you draw the polygons and painter's algorithm back, and then that's it. The actual calculations for this and the rasterization of the polygons are done in they're differential. So we calculate the new position, and we calculate only what's changed, and we rasterize only what's changed. It was a lot of work, and
that's also the way C64 demos usually do it.
Really? That they do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they don't actually calculate. A lot of this is just pre-calculated. Like, basically, a lot of 3D parts you see in C64 demos are actually basically just a list of spans to fill.
Oh, really? Well, we did the hard way.
They don't actually have the cycles to do this.
Oh, well, it makes sense. It's nothing in the demo is pre-calced. So except for the Alcatraz bars, there's a pre-calc 10-second part, so that we can refer to it. And then probably the piece de resistance is this mod player at the end. So we figured out how many cycles do we have to calculate a new sample, and it's 288 cycles, if I remember correctly, and Andrew will probably if I get that wrong. So how do you do that? And so there were a lot of limitations. We asked our music composer to use samples that were exactly 256 bytes in length, and you can guess why that was. And we also don't index. I'm running out of time, and I'm not doing a good job. We don't index linearly. We index.
I'll pause it. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I can't.
Speak all you want.
I didn't write. Renigni's right there on the screen, and he's the one who did the 4-channel player, so he could explain it better. Actually, to be fair, we wrote all of this up. So if you search for 88 miles per hour on Google, you can get a full...
Yeah, I read that write-up. That was very insightful, and especially knowing more the limitations of 80-80-80 and the CGA mode itself. It's really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And as Rick was mentioning, there's a lot of correlations with what they do on the Commodore 64. So very cool stuff for those guys to also check out if they're doing
I
things.
mean, some of the techniques might be compatible across platforms. So anyway, you can unpause it now. It's just it was if all of your samples are 256 bytes in length, that's an optimization. We figured out a way to read by column instead of by row, and that was another optimization. And, the reason this is scrolling so slowly is because this is all of the CPU time we had left. We have 50 cycles per tracker row left, and so that's update a character or scroll the screen up. So those characters are scrolling across at 50 hertz because the trackers are 50 hertz. So yeah, that's it.
This is a very tight fit to make everything work.
When you use we're using a pulse width modulation technique to get digitized audio out the speaker, and when you do that, there's an audible carrier wave at the frequency that you're outputting. So we had to have a frequency high enough that you wouldn't hear this horrible annoying whine when you heard the music. So we chose a nice multiple of the DRAM refresh interval so that things would line up and we wouldn't have audible jitter between the DRAM refresh and the music routine. And so that turned into 16.572 samples a second, 16.7 kilohertz. And when you play it that fast, you have 50 cycles per tracker row to do something. So that's what that was. So at the end of this, thunderous applause. And we were also played last in the competition, which is sort of a sign of respect, I think, from the organizers.
You get the moral award from the organizers.
You get the moral award from the organizers. And at that point, I was super happy. Like, that was it for me. When I saw that the compo had ended, I was just utterly elated that they chose us for last. And then, unfortunately, I wasn't there to see the actual ratings and stuff, but we won by a very small margin. The wonderful Amiga demo in the same competition, came very close. But this was a bucket list item for me. 25 years in the scene and finally winning what I would consider the World Series of old school competitions, and I was flattered and humbled and then actually quite burnt out. I haven't done any demo coding since.
And this was your actually first European demo party. You came here especially for this.
If you're not going to bring your A game, don't show up at all. That's how I feel about. No, I'm totally serious. That's how I feel about giant European parties like Revision, or I don't know what's another great one. What's the one with the Commodore demos are amazing? Is it X?
X, yeah.
Don't go to X with a demo unless you're bringing your A game. I mean, so that's how I feel about it. I guess that's sort of an offshoot of the silence philosophy. It was a silence philosophy. If you're not going to do it better, why do it at all? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But then we'll have a lot less demos as the bar rises.
True. And I had to make a lot of really embarrassing stuff that you will never see before we got to this point.
Well, it was really impressive. So I was.
Thank you.
I remember watching this, and I was like, "Wow!" That's what I have to give Jim credit for. He manages. He's like so persistent about. He's like, "I'm going to figure out a way to do this, and I don't care if it takes me 20 years. I'm going to make this work." I do not have.
I just wish it didn't take me 20 years.
I don't have that kind of patience anymore.
Yeah. I think part of this, like your video compiler and so on, that was not on the 8088, right? That wasn't something else.
The video the actual video compiler was 8088 Domination, which was 2 years before this, or 1 year before this. Yeah. And that was something that we didn't show, but there's no point in showing it. It's the same thing as Corruption, but in graphics mode. And that was just me thinking, how can I improve on it? And it turns out writing a compiler is the way that you do
but
it.
That one, like, did the compiler run on the 8088, or was it somewhere else?
It did. The reason it did is because you're going to be like, whoa. I know why. Why did the compiler run on the 88? Because at the time I wanted to do some optimization and time it on the actual hardware, on the actual playback hardware. Eventually, at the same time, and this is before 88 miles per hour, I had been talking with Rianigni for several years. In fact, we met originally in the 1990s when I hosted his Digger remastered site. So if you've ever played Digger in Java or recompiled somewhere, he reverse engineered Digger and put that up on the web, and I hosted it, and so that's how we originally met. Because so we had been talking about things like this for quite a while. It just had never solidified into a demo. And part of these conversations were, what is the best way to optimize? Is it counting cycles? Is it size of bytes? Is it a combination of both? Because the 8088 has a small, almost insignificant but still functional prefetch queue of 4 bytes, and so you have to work that into your calculations. So what I eventually ended up doing was working in like an estimate. I was going to get it to the point where I tested it on the target hardware, but to get there faster, I did an estimate of, okay, well, this opcode is this many cycles, and et cetera. And then I never got to the point where I was compiling it on the 88, but you can run it on the 88 if you really want to, and it's incredibly slow, and I don't recommend people do it. And no, I haven't translated it to something modern like Python or whatever, because this is a silly project. But yeah, the compiler is 16-bit.
So the reason I was asking is because if you look at current like C64, Atari ST is a famous example. Like there's these Atari ST sprite records. Leonard of Oxygen did this crazy stuff where he just kept pushing the record. It was a couple of years ago. It's fairly recent.
Yeah.
And like that all is massively based on just having this crazy pre-compiler on PC that just outputs a data file with the exact sequence of instructions to do that number of sprites. And so that's an effect that runs on an old school ST, but you just wouldn't have been able to actually do it 20 years ago.
Exactly.
Because you need a modern machine to be able to generate the data file that this uses.
I completely agree. In fact, when I did come out with the video compiler, I had some very cynical C64 sceners come up to me and go, "Welcome to speed coding." And for them, speed coding means you run a program on a modern machine to pre-calculate the actual instruction opcodes out. I'm
that's fake.
Thanks, guys.
You're a cheater.
I'm not cheating, though. I'm just catching
Not
up.
cheating. No, this is the way it's done.
Yeah,
fact,
most people nowadays,
C64...
even on the Spectrum scene, they also use PC stuff and then run it on the Spectrum.
Yeah, no, Fabian,
Like,
you're
in
absolutely
C64
right.
demos, there's a lot of trading off between actually having like the unrolled loops for this big screen effect that you want to do, and just generating that unrolled loop in the background. Like if you look at C64 demos, there's always big effect. Then maybe they show a picture. If they show a picture, that means they need to free up RAM.
Yeah.
Because that picture is whatever. It's like
That's
8
right.
kilobytes, 16 kilobytes that they now need for the next effect. So they
And
show
time
that.
to pre-calc the next effect too.
Exactly. Like, then
Yeah, I'm
there's
with you.
this big transition part where there's just like, oh, we clear the screen slowly. And then
Yes,
there's like some fiddly sprites moving around. Nothing
Yes.
is going on the screen. Well, what's actually going on?
I
Like
know
that
what
thing
you're doing.
Running a routine in the background that's just setting up the unrolled loop for the next effect. And that just takes a couple frames. So you need to do something with that dead time. It's just like I was always confused because C64 people told me like, oh, linking a C64 demo is a nightmare. Like PC coder was like, linking? What? It's just you just run the program and it produces the executable. What are you talking about? What C64 people mean by linking is that they have a bunch of one effect screens that all have their pre-calc time, whatever, and they need to arrange that into a playable sequence so that the memory budgets work out.
Yeah,
and they need to overlap the pre-calc times and everything, and it's super intricate. It's
On PC, we just
ton
say
of
get
work.
more RAM and you know, figure your shit out.
And a bigger disk drive.
Yeah.
The 177K isn't cutting it anymore, guys.
I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, Trickster. One of them
Sure.
is, you've been doing a few videos on old school platforms. Is this like just because you love retro platforms, or are you aiming for a world's first?
Well, as long as the audience of this is under 1,000, and I feel comfortable admitting this, to be honest, actually, it's a reaction. So I left the scene around 97, and I was unhappy that people were producing stuff where that maybe wasn't pushing technical boundaries. They were trying to tell stories and stuff. And I hate to, even now I say it kind of sarcastically, like, "Ooh, I'm telling a story with my demo." That I didn't like that. For me, coming from cracking in the 80s and stuff, it was always about hammering the hardware as best you could and coming up with something that the designers didn't originally, envision. So when I saw this kind of, CPUs are so fast now, it doesn't even matter. I bowed out, and then I decided to start doing so. I know, no, hey, I have the utmost respect for what Fabian does. Fabian is one of the top 10 optimizers in the whole world. So
I'm not sure that's true.
I am.
But
I
take
hold
the
you.
credit.
Well, let's just say if you were in a restaurant with Terry Matheson and the place blew up, it would be a giant detriment to optimization worldwide. But anyway, so when I came back in 2004, it was like I was playing around with old systems, and vintage computing and restoring systems, as you can see behind me, was always sort of a hobby. And I figured, well, could we do amazing stuff there? So me coming back to the scene for old school platforms only is sort of like me being insecure that I wouldn't be able to make a reasonably useful contribution to the modern scene at that time. My 3D math is not very strong. I haven't done any to date. I still haven't done any OpenGL programming. So I mean, I've tried to do a couple of modern things. Like I've done some 256-byte intros and things like that. But for the most part, it's more like I was always in awe of how the C64 scene kept getting better and better and better and better. And that's because their platforms stayed static. And they could keep using modern tools and modern techniques and reiterating and getting things better. And I thought nobody's doing that for the old PC, so I thought I'd make that my niche.
That's awesome.
That's it, really. So insecurity is the real reason why I did.
I wouldn't call it insecurity. I mean, you're more interested in pushing the boundaries, the technical boundaries of platforms, and that's completely valid. I mean, the demo scene is the great thing about the demo scene is that you can choose what you want to invest your time on. If you want to push the technical stuff, you can do that. If you want to do more designer and explain your feelings in a demo, you can also push that side. And it's up to each person to figure out what they want to contribute to it. And it's really cool that you started doing that on the PC, because most of the people pick old school platforms like the C64, the Atari, the Spectrum that are always fixed, and DOS demos just kind of died. People still use them
Right.
for 256-byte stuff, but no one really pushes it in terms of hardware. So I was really surprised when I noticed that you were doing, stuff for using the CGA mode and 808080. I really like that, and I think it's really cool. And I'm pretty sure that you can still do more stuff to push it more technically,
Well,
or
yeah.
find another platform that it hasn't been explored properly yet.
Well, the 88 miles per hour was 8 minutes because the compo limits were 8 minutes. I haven't been involved, but some of the other guys are working on something new. So you might see something new.
That's cool. That's awesome.
With even more tricks and even more interesting sound things and stuff like that. I agree the scene is multi-diverse and we can do what we like. I'm still going to say it was a cop-out for me to concentrate on that because it's a fixed platform and I can hyper-focus on it for several years and really learn it intimately. I think Raig has the tougher job in that his CPUs are constantly changing. And seriously, and
They're not changing that much, luckily.
Really? Because
Very gradual, yeah.
It's
very
gradual. Okay. So
Intel has the same problem because they have these massive teams, and so like chip that came out, like they're released now, the Skylake Xeons. Back when I was involved with Larrabee in 2011 and 2012, no, this was 2011. Like they were finalizing the architecture of that chip. So whenever people say like, "Oh, Intel are responding," and like this, like 2 years after AMD came out with something or whatever, like they're responding and they're tweaking the architecture. Like, no, their lead times are so much larger than that. It's like this is just a massive effort, and they're just working off simulations and so on, and they're doing very incremental changes when they can, because it's such a giant lead time. So they're doing, I mean, they're tweaking everything, but all of it is very incremental. Because they don't have the capacity to just do something from scratch, really. Like, not even them. It's just such a massive undertaking, and if you get it wrong, you'll learn 4 years later when the silicon comes back, it's like, oh shit, we screwed up. I mean, that's what happened with Intel with the Pentium 4. By the time they had first silicon and were starting selling the Pentium 4, they already knew that they had screwed up that architecture and it was a bad move. And they had to sell it for 4 more years until their replacement that they were already working on was out. And it's just thing with all the other stuff. It's such a lead time. Like they can't afford to make giant changes because it's a gamble.
Yep.
Fair. That's fair. I'm going to counter a little bit by saying though that because the pipelines are so deep and because they do make some subtle changes, there's really no such thing as assembler optimizing anymore. It's really compiler optimization.
There is. Absolutely there is.
Really?
It's actually
I would love to be corrected. I can't even begin to think of how the heck I would hand optimize something with a gigantically deep pipeline.
So the thing is, you don't do it like that. It's not so much about trying. If you're on an order machine, you're trying to make everything slot into just right place, right? You need to make sure it all works out. If you're doing something for an out of order machine, it's actually way simpler in many ways. Since the machine already knows how to schedule itself. So you just give it a list of here's a list of things you can do, and they just go into a queue. And the machine is smart enough to issue whatever makes the most sense in every given cycle. So it stops being from a point where you need to determine, like, this is the exact schedule that we do things in. Do this, and this, and this, and this, and they'll all be fine. It goes to, like, okay, you look at this, like, this flow thing. It's this big pipe. And you push stuff in at one end and it eventually comes out the other. And what you're trying to do, like there's various limits within the machine of what kinds of things can be consumed and processed at what rate. And that's the kind of stuff you look at. So it's not so much about trying to figure out what's going in each cycle anymore. You don't even have to do that because the machine is good at that by itself. It's a much higher level thing. Where you're just looking at the overall behavior, like what's this behavior of the system, like how fast can this kind of stuff go through the machine, how fast can this kind of stuff, what are the dependencies between these, and how do I need to arrange that to make that work. So it
comes down to caching, really.
Cache is a big part of it, but a lot of it is just, if you look at any given loop, like you can kind of trace, like what's the actual computation. If you trace through this, like I do this thing, and then the result of that feeds into this, and the result of that feeds into this, and you just look at what these dependency arcs are, And then you need to figure out, like, okay, like, is there enough parallel work that the machine can even find to do in any given cycle to fill it up? And if so, you're good. And if not, you have to tweak the algorithm so that the machine can find enough things to do so that its functional units don't go idle.
Yeah,
and that's
so
an
it
interesting
does
thing,
stuff in
but it's
parallel.
a very high-level thing of looking at what kind of thing am I doing? Like, what are the dependencies between that? And can I figure out a way to structure this computation in a different way so that when the machine looks at the final instruction stream, there's just stuff there it can do independently. So you're not tweaking the schedule or anything like that much anyway. Like, but you're like, if you do stuff like that, it's just very, very small tweaks that you do. Like, whatever, I need to free up a register sooner. If you look at the actual machine, like, these things have tons of registers. Like, a current CPU has something like 170 registers internally.
Yeah.
But you only have 16 names of registers that you can actually use. So a lot of the code scheduling is just like, okay, figuring out when you basically give up that register name. Internally, there's tons of registers, but you just have only that many names you can call them, and you have to kind of work around that limitation, and then the machine just has these giant buffers. Like, oh, I can handle 200 instructions in flight, various stages of completion. So, like, all the micro stuff about what happens every cycle, you don't really have a lot of control over exactly what happens, especially since there's still things like interrupts going on that just are unpredictable as far as you're concerned. But the higher level stuff is like, okay, what's the basically flow rate, as I said? Like, what's the kind of, like, you know exactly, for example, like, if you have, like, CPU this generation has, say, 1 floating point multiplier. That means you can sustain 1 floating point multiplier per cycle. And you have a code that has a bunch of floating point multipliers. Like,
per cycle.
If there's a million floating point multiply instructions in there, that's gonna take at least 1 million cycles. It has to. It can't go any faster than that.
Yeah.
And then you can look at these kinds of things and just figure out, okay, like, what's a lower bound on how fast it could possibly be, based on the instruction mixture. And say, based on how many code bytes you can feed into that machine and so on. You get a bunch of different lower bounds. Like, based on this limit, it can't go faster than this. Based on this limit, it can't go faster than this. And one of these ends up being a bottleneck. And the tools can tell you which of these is the thing that you actually need to be worrying out at the moment. And
So
then
you're
you
more
can
like
just-
identifying the bottlenecks of the different structures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love how
Very
you still call
interesting
yourself not one of the world's 10 best optimizers. When you are able to just summarize that for us.
to do this, and most of them you've never heard of.
I think we have to have an entirely separate show just for this.
I was struggling deciding, should I call them off this conversation or should I, because I'm interested, I want to hear more about it, but at the same time we are completely getting sidetracked.
We can have an optimization show.
Focus enough, so I'm going to be mostly quiet for the rest of the whole thing. It's we should give Charles his
No,
due.
that's
And
it's
yeah,
really
let's-
cool.
I do want to say one last thing. I love not only how incredibly young the people are in this demo, like some of them are prepubescent, and I also love the fact that they colored in all of their glasses to make it look like they were wearing shades.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about this particular demo that I was going to say is that in the beginning part, it reminded me of when I first saw this, I didn't have a Sound Blaster. I had a thing on a parallel port that I built with a bunch of wires and a perf board and a bunch of ICs, and it sounded terrible. But this thing actually supported it. It was kind of like the poor man's Kovacs 8-bit thing.
Hey,
but I remember watching how it does.
You just take a parallel port, wire up some resistors. Like,
Yeah.
it's not rocket science. It's not
Exactly.
great quality, but it's
No, it's not linear either.
It was terrible, but I remember watching that on this, and then I believe later on I watched it on something that was more. I was like, wow, that sounds so much better. But this was one of the first demos I had ever seen that wasn't specifically oriented toward a crack or the beginning of a game or something. So it was pretty cool. And Daredevil.
So to start off your part specifically of this show. You were involved in the BBSs, you had your own BBS, you were telling us, and then mostly focused on track music, mod music. And how did you get involved with the demo scene? You saw this demo in particular. How did that come about?
So I think this demo, and then we could probably skip to the next one because this goes for like 45 minutes. But
yeah, I'm gonna skip to
the whole scroll text.
Skip to the 3D part, not the whole demo.
Okay, hold on. I'll go back and Yeah, the demo is 45 minutes. Strangely enough,
Yeah.
still going.
But
I remember.
yeah.
There we go.
I remember it had a light source part, and I remember being impressed by that. That wasn't this the demo where there's like a light that goes around it and it's that was very impressive to me. It's probably not in the Spectre Ball part, but it's somewhere.
There's something later, yeah, where they have this dot like these 5 pixels. This
No, they're waiting for the Swedish flag. I mean, I guess.
Light source. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was the cool part about this one. I don't know.
Let me skip a bit more. Amiga Ball. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, go on.
There we go. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think this was just one of a few things that were kind of trickling out, and like I said before, I was focusing on track music because there really was. There weren't a lot of those things available because we had just gotten Track Blaster, and that was the only way you could play that stuff on a PC. And on PC BBSs, I don't know what was happening on the Amiga side at that time, but you just couldn't find them. So I just wanted to collect as many mod files as I could. And what happened was my BBS had so many mod files, no one could find anything to upload to get the ratio. So the people started uploading these demos, and I was like, I don't want this stuff. But then when I started watching it, I think Sound Blaster made such a big difference because just having an audio card on a PC where, before you didn't have any of that stuff, you couldn't get good sound out of it. So being able to do that, and I think it kind of opened the door to this. And
did you guys have the GUS in the US? Because here there were a lot of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a few years later though. That was I don't remember what year that was. Jim, do you remember what year the GUS came out?
I think it was late '93 or early '94. We definitely had quite a lot of them. At least anyone involved in the American demo scene had a GUS.
For the European demo scene as well, there's like a big Skype of demos. Some of them only support the GUS. They don't support Sound Blaster at all.
And the biggest
that the way to promote the hardware was just to give it to lots of demo sceners, and then they
definitely.
I heard something like that.
That's totally what happened. Because I'll tell you what happened in the beginning was I actually purchased my own GUS, and I didn't buy. I only bought one because all the rest I got for free. But the first one I bought, and then we started looking at the hardware. It's like, wow, this is really interesting. But they only provided a C library with it. So we talked to them, and they wouldn't give us any low-level documentation. So there was no support for it at this time, except for they had a Sound Blaster emulator. And so we decided, hey, look, let's just reverse engineer this thing. And so we ripped the libraries apart, and we figured out how to play it, and we ended up writing all the documentation and publishing it. And they got so mad at us because we basically put it out on the internet for free. Actually, it was not even on the internet at the time. I don't even know. It was probably just BBSs.
It was BBSs. That's where I found it.
But they got upset at us, and then they realized they changed their tune real fast because we started making things. And I think Daretro, which is somewhere later in this playlist, was the first. I think production that used a GUS, and the sound driver in there was absolutely terrible. It was timed to the vertical retrace, like it had no timing of its own, and that was really like we had to figure out the whole GUS click thing and how to solve that by ramping volume, and so we basically they should be thanking us for making their hardware viable.
Yeah, Philippe, what you missed is that you may not know that Daredevil and Renaissance were responsible for reverse engineering the GUS libraries, the C libraries, yes, and producing information documents on how to actually drive the GUS and spreading them through BBSs. That's actually how I started poking around with mine.
Yeah,
very cool stuff.
We thought it was such a cool piece of hardware, but we had to go in. When I bought my first GUS, I had to go to a store and buy actual like DRAM chips to put in there because it only came with. I think you could put up to 1 megabyte. I think it came with 256K or 512 or something. 256 was the original, and I remember buying them from this little shady shop down in downtown
Which is
Manhattan.
nothing. 256. Like you put like one sample there, and it's already.
I know. So, but when you think about the typical mod file back then that was being uploaded at 9600 baud if you were lucky, or maybe 14.4 if you got on the SysOp deal with, US Robotics. But so you were transferring these smaller things and you had to put a whole mod in memory. And so that once we were able to do that, that was a big game changer because you freed up so many CPU cycles. You don't have to mess around with that anymore. So that was a lot of fun, and that's where I think we started getting into writing mod players and anything else we could do with the Gust, because we just suddenly had this whole new canvas to play music on. And for me, it was always about the music. I was really into music. I was learning, how to be a musician, like a real musician, and try to, play instruments and stuff. So
do you do music nowadays?
I don't. I just play guitar when I can. Well, I'm usually at work. Like I work from home, so I have all this stuff sitting around. But the thing is, it's not as easy anymore. But I think I probably play music more than I do make demos. So that's a good thing.
The difficulty is different. I mean, like back then, like the stuff that people were doing was, in some sense, a lot easier. But there was also no documentation for anything.
Right.
Like I remember people from the Amiga demo scene telling me, like somebody had found the equation, like the 2x2 determinant, to do backface culling, and they were guarding it like this big secret that only they knew, because they didn't want anybody else to know that he could only draw half the faces and nobody could tell.
Yeah. Well, that was the other interesting thing, is that nobody, the information, the world was a lot smaller back then, right? Because maybe someone else was doing this, but you didn't really know it. But now on the internet, it's easy. Quick Google search, and chances are your idea has already been tried. So
and improved on.
Exactly. So it's really kind of cool.
As John Miles said, like last year conference I was, so like of the Miles sound system, he was talking about this error, and he was like, well, computers weren't really that good. The quote was, we weren't really that good at math back then, but neither were computers.
That's a good quote.
And
this was like the coolest.
To that. Like,
I mean, this was like the coolest thing here, where like this thing was filling up.
Yes.
And the pixels falling into there. I know that was one of the things that I always was fascinated with, like pixel effects.
Yep.
And because you think about it was just a lot of stuff to keep track of, and I always thought it was very cool. So this was one that definitely influenced my ideas.
So one of the classic Future Crew intros, I believe it's actually an invitation for an assembly. Probably assembly,
I think it was assembly 92.
92?
92.
Okay.
It was 92, yeah. I remember
92?
that.
Yeah, I think it was 92.
Yeah, it was, because this was the invitation for assembly 92. I so wanted to go, but there was no way. I was like just a kid, I wasn't going to go. And but then I think that's when
Daredevil, have you ever been to a demo party in the Europe?
No, I never made it. I almost went to Assembly 93, I think, and we were planning, we were trying, and that was kind of when
a good one too.
Yeah, would have.
So it just didn't happen. But still, this was even though it was just a kind of a advertisement, but it was a very cool thing. I remember, and just like kind of getting a feel for the
screen factor.
Yeah. I think just the music and stuff in these things was very memorable.
Yeah.
So Daredevil, Renaissance is very known for two things. First is exploring weird video modes, which I believe is mostly trans doing. And the other one is doing cool music discs, which at the time was pretty big. And as you said, the US had a very big tracker scene. So I guess it was only natural that you focused a bit more on music disc stuff. So what can you tell us from those days?
Well, I think really the thing was we had two really great musicians, and then we ended up with just very musician heavy. We ended up with a few really great musicians, CC Catch and Mosaic, and Ryan Kramer was another one. And then we ended up with, I think, Leviathan, and I can't remember all the names of these guys, unfortunately, because it's so long ago. But the thing that we ended up doing, like I remember when Amnesia was
Wasn't
released,
Necros as well part of Renaissance?
No, he was never. No, he was not in our group. But he was an honorary member only for that one thing that I did with him at NAID. But the interesting thing was the music was what everyone liked so much. So even when we released Amnesia, we released a separate little player that you could just run, and it would just open up the Amnesia executable and play the music out of there. So that, I think, was the video modes were interesting. I definitely ruined a couple of monitors with that, but the thing that I thought was that I was most proud of that we had worked through, and mostly Tom, but that's Tran, was the coming up with different ways to mix mix digital with FM, because I thought we really liked the FM sounds, but not just by themselves, because obviously they don't work for everything. But like this would have not have been possible on just digital at the time, just with the very high frequencies that you just couldn't get out of like 8-bit digital. So so in this demo, like all the music in here was digital and FM, which was, I think it was the first use of that when Tom wrote that. And I don't know, I think it worked on most hardware, but I'm sure it had problems.
And one of the things that, since you use all those weird resolutions, there aren't that many captures of it nowadays. So it's like stuff that's made in the 90s that's very influential, even for a lot of European sceners. There are a lot of European sceners that talk about the Renaissance demos and video modes that they were used and special effects that it used. And nowadays I was looking for videos to use in this show for the playlist, and most of your demos and music lists are not captured and they're not on YouTube. Is it because DOSBox sucks or just didn't have the time? What's up with that?
I don't know. I haven't tried it, but I know that it's not really, most of it wasn't about the video mode. Most of the issues that I was having when running these things was related to our DOS extender. You know, we were experimenting with protected mode because it was just so much easier. And now, of course, you know, everything is protected mode. But in the back in the old days, you didn't have access to the memory. So experimenting with protected mode, there were a lot of bugs. There wasn't a lot of documentation. So as we progressed along, you know, I think it got better when we got up to more modern stuff. But it was very hard to get it to work on every computer because sometimes it just blew up. Wouldn't even start, lock up. So I don't know. I think that I have to take a look. I'm curious to try to run some of the old stuff, but I captured a lot of the music. I actually took most of the CDFM stuff, the digital FM stuff, and I dumped it to just straight wave files, and so now I can play that stuff. But because that's what, again, it goes back for me. It's all about the music. I liked a lot of this stuff. You know, this is like really basic effects by today's standards, but back then this ran on a 386. And I think it was coded up on a 386 SX16, so 16 megahertz. Computer. And so doing something like this is probably not that impressive today. The one that really, I think, blew me away when we had talked about earlier was Do Wackadoo. It was by White Shadow and Zeke, who had joined our group from another. They had kind of.
I have that one, so let me play it.
Yeah, it's in there. But one of the cool things about that is it runs on a 286, and I don't even know how someone captured this because the video mode was crazy.
Yes.
It was like another one of those crazy. Everything on the screen was doing something.
It's very inspired by the Atari scene. You can tell, like all the text moving. And, and the coppers.
There's like so many different scrollers.
This is also a good test for how good your VGA is, by the way. Since like if a lot of VGA cards, some of the effects don't really work.
Really?
Yeah. Like I had two where it didn't quite work. Like where the scroller there on the side of the screen that has the raster bar colors. Something used to glitched out there, or there was no whatever.
No color. Yeah.
It just impresses me that this ran on a 286, and they were able to do so much. I mean, this kind of like reminds me a lot of the stuff that Jim works on now. You know, it's just being able to do really weird stuff and push the hardware.
He was an inspiration. You know, just for giggles, I disassembled this code, and his mix routine mixes directly into the DMA buffer, like cycles before it actually gets there, before it's actually played by the card. It's really quite amazing stuff.
Yeah. No, it was very impressive at the time.
He was really good.
It was like instantaneously, we need to get this guy in the group. So he was. This was kind of at the point where Tom wasn't doing as much anymore. He just kind of didn't want to focus on making these. We spent so much time writing these big demos, and it just got to the point where we just wanted to release like smaller stuff. And so these guys joined the group, but then I don't know, just a short time later, we just kind of disbanded and reformed in a different way. But this was the result of something that they had been working on before they joined the group, and that's what the SPD is in the middle. It's the Shadow Productions.
I always wondered.
Yeah. So they had built it, and then they kind of revamped it a little bit. I always loved the Pac-Man scroller. That was one of my favorites. So anyhow.
Anyways, let's take a look at the demo that you actually coded, and this is Dare Throw by Renaissance. What a clever name! How did you ever come up with that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, when looking at this now, it makes me like cringe just looking at the fonts and everything that's involved. But we just kind of, I was playing with these effects, and I wanted to do a 1-pixel sine wave scroller for a long time, and just kind of making it morph was just an added bonus. And I think just being able to be the first intro, we just were like, oh, we have this gust driver, and even though it's not, the timing is kind of weird, we are just going to go and push this thing out there because I just want to be the first. It was kind of like a competitive thing at the time.
World first.
I already had it built, you know, so, and then Tom, I think, drew that skull in deluxe paint or something like that. I don't know.
It's a very realistic skull as well.
I know, it looks just like mine. So I love vector bars. I don't know. Those things just, the copper things. Anyway, those things always are just like so cool to me. I don't know. This was a fun demo. I think like I remember also having trouble getting this to run on various Gravis ultrasounds, but for the most part, it worked. You know.
Is it just one screen? I thought it was multi-part. But
I don't think it does much more than
it's a one screen. It really was the Wild West. I remember another Renaissance production, maybe this was Trans. He had done 320 by 400 mode, which requires 128K, not 64. But he found a way to kind of like bit bang the registers to make it work in chunky mode. Like he didn't unchain the video to be planar. And I went through like 5 cards trying to find a VGA card that could run that thing because he was doing something very specific for like a specific chipset. It was driving me nuts. Yeah. But I did eventually find it.
And of course, it's not documented on the info file what card it was that he used, so no one really knows.
I think it might have been.
This is always amusing to me, by the way, because if you think about it, modern GPUs still implement the VGA standard, and they're still actually have like all that compatibility stuff is still there and it still works. I know this because in 2012 I booted the machine into DOS, which with the modern machine is not easy. Yes, to do some like little bit bang experiments and like DOS actually made sense, but like all that stuff still works.
I can tell you what the chipset was. It's funny that I actually remember this. It was the Sang ET4000.
Yep,
that's right.
The chipset, and that was the one that we were seeking out those video cards just because I don't know, that's what we coded to. So, and then everyone in the demo scene was trying to use those same ones, but I had a lot of problems because I had this like Trident card, and it was just never worked with any of the stuff that he would send me. So. And this thing, of course, you know, it's a modern masterpiece. So,
can I tell the
True.
It's on. Can I tell Charles? Do you want to tell the story of how Necros made the music, or do you want me to tell the story?
I could talk about it. So, I mean, this. Well, first of all, the plumber there, Tran sent me this file, and he was just like, "Ha, look at this," and I was just like, "Well, it'd be much better if he was pissing." And I was like, "All right, well, maybe we'll do that another time." So I had already kind of coded this thing up, and I didn't have music, so I needed music.
You had a piss sequence ready?
I already had the pixel thing, because I told you I like pixels. I had the pixels. And yeah, so I was like, well, let's just change it yellow, and we'll make it piss. But Necros, I needed music, and I said to him, I was like, could you please code me something, throw something together in Scream Tracker? So he just went and like pulled out the text files and stuff, the documentation that came with Scream Tracker, and he started looping them, and he came up with this little short little mod. So I don't know.
So I need to reiterate this. He had trouble reading some of his samples, so he just started pulling chunks of text files like file id.diz and chunks of the documentation and making them into samples. If you listen to the bass line, that dunk 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 dunk, I think I think you can look at it and read it. It's file underscore id.diz.
Yeah, it is. That was. It was impressive, and I don't think he wants anyone to know that he made this song, but it is in the thing. And then there was Friar Tuck, he helped me with a bunch of stuff on this too. I don't remember exactly what each of us did, but we just kind of slapped it all together. I think he came up with the font and the text bit, and he wrote up all that stuff. But it was a lot of fun. It was just kind of like, this was the spirit of trying to get something entered into a compo that nobody had entered. So eventually people did finish up stuff that was way better than this. So
so do you feel
obvious?
Do you feel this is the highlight of your career in Renaissance? I would really like to show Epidemic music this, but unfortunately we don't have a capture of it. But for me, Renaissance is for me Epidemic is the highlight of Renaissance. Of course, it's Renaissance as a group is more known for the earlier stuff, mostly done by Tran with different video modes, but at least for me, Epidemic is a really good summary of what Renaissance really is. And for what?
Yeah, and P-mode. Don't forget P-mode.
P-mode,
P-mode was probably the P-mode, and P-mode W was... P-mode W, Tom and I put together because we wanted to work with the Watcom compiler because it was just so much easier at the time. It was like, wow, we can code in C and assembler, and it was so neat to be able to do that. And so, yeah, that was great being able to play Doom with our own DOS extender, and we kind of rip out DOS4GW, stick that in. But I think Epidemic was cool because it was a collaboration with so many different people from different places, and I never really thought of that as any kind of crowning achievement. To me, it was just the music driver in there was what I was most proud of, because I spent a lot of time reverse engineering everybody else's music driver, understanding how mods were supposed to sound, understanding how S3Ms were supposed to sound, and we spent a lot of time getting that right. And I think that's the same music driver that ended up getting used in what was that game, Zixit? And a couple other different places.
Zixit, Zone 66 maybe?
I don't think that, no, Zone 66 used a different music driver because those were all 669 files. But I think Zixit used S3Ms. It was actually screen tracker files, and my music driver was in there. Nice. But anyway, that was really, I think, Epidemic. That for me, that's what the big thing about Epidemic was. But overall, the music in Epidemic is classic. Everybody knows it, and Necro still hates me for asking him to reduce the number of channels on his song. From he made like a 16 channel. I asked him to reduce it to 8, and then I think I let him go back up to 16 again at some point. But it was cool. Hopefully, we can get a capture of that at some point.
I'll put it on my list.
One more question that I wanted to ask you: why did the Renaissance just fade away? You just, real life got in the way. You guys stopped caring about Demoscene stuff.
Yeah, I think it's just real life. I know once Tom kind of wasn't as interested anymore, and he started doing his own stuff. I remember those demos he put out, Hell, and he had those really interesting screensavers that he built, Timeless, and those were really just kind of his transition from, he didn't want to work in a group anymore. So once that happened, I brought in this guy, Starscream. Him and I started working together. Dan Goldstein, he was a really good guy. He wrote that multi-tracker. MTM format was his creation, and we did a lot of collaboration for a bunch of years. But yeah, I think after a while, I think it was when he went to college, and I went to college, and that was like, all right, life is changed. Did he stab you in the back? No. We just kind of lost touch, and I still see a lot of these people every now and then. Like I run into Kenny, CC Catch. I run into him at various places, and I don't know. It's just like every once in a while, it's a treat to kind of go back and reminisce about it. But it was a lot of fun at the time, and then I think I have lost touch with the demo scene entirely. Honestly, I keep in touch with only a few people.
Most of those musicians that were really high profile in the US ended up working for the games industry. You mentioned CC Catch, and he's a pretty well known musician. There was also Basshead, Leviathan. I don't know what happened to Leviathan, but
to some extent in Europe as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Jesper Kid, for example.
Yeah. A lot of big names.
Jarentel as well.
Jarentel.
Skaven.
Yeah. The Necros himself as well, so which is cool. I mean, what is my question in the middle of all this? Nowadays, there are no more tracker scene kind of thing. There's directly MP3. Well, it's a bit hard. My question was going to be, do you think the current demo scene really misses that tracker relation or music groups relation? But I think you guys might not be following the current demo scene as much, so it's a bit hard.
But it's tough, but I think you know,
are you asking if the current scene is missing something by not having tracked music?
I mean, we have a lot of musicians, but there isn't that community spirit that the tracker groups had. Now we have those things called net labels as well, which is kind of a label, and we have music, but it's not really that connected to the demo scene either. Not like the music tracker scene used to be.
Right. I think the tracker scene, interestingly enough, you know, was kind of it was necessary, right? There was a symbiotic relationship there. You had people that had a desire to get their music into demos because so many people got to see them, and then you had demo coders who had a desire to have music because they didn't want to do anything else but write code. And then you had people like me who tried to make track music, but who really was better on the coding side. But I think so. It was kind of a cool relationship that existed, and I don't know if it exists today because, like you said, I don't follow, but I think there's a certain freedom today in being able to make the music any way you want and just present whatever your idea was, because the trackers did create there was some certain creativity in using a tracker, right? Because you had to be creative about making this music, but tracked music has a certain, I think, sound to it, a certain quality, and it's definitely a timeless thing. I mean, people do enjoy, just like people enjoy going back and listening to Sid music. You know, it's something about it that's very nostalgic. But I think today is very exciting because for me anyway, I can fire up GarageBand or something and I can track like a whole multi-track thing. And as a musician, it's very liberating. Yeah. But it just doesn't have the same. It's not the same feel, but it's different.
This is some character as well.
Part of it is that in the early 90s, if you were doing music on a home computer, like PC or whatever, Atari Amiga, like you were not a regular musician. Like you were somebody who had a home computer and wanted to do something on the home computer and wanted to do music on it. So it was very tight knit. These days, like if you're doing music and you're doing it on a computer, it's like, no, every musician does that. Like, everybody who's making music has a computer in the mix somewhere. So like it's not that cohesive anymore, simply because if you were doing music on a computer in the 90s, it was a special thing and you were hanging around with other people who did that. And now it's just everybody who makes music. And so all the stuff...
So it's no longer special.
Right. And it was kind of funny.
With the structures are now just like Bandcamp, with net labels and so on. Just this is stuff for musicians. And it's just any musician. Like
anybody can be a musician.
And more importantly, like the people who are doing this are not like quote unquote stereotypical nerds anymore. They're not hanging around on BBSs. It's just a different sort of community. Like they're now united by being people who make music. Period.
Yeah. I remember
it's the SoundCloud thing that I was mentioning before. Now it's a SoundCloud scene. You know, they don't create groups. They just comment on each other's tracks on SoundCloud and have their own music showers.
Back in the early 90s when you wanted samples, right? You either got them from somebody else's stuff, or I remember CC Catch, I remember going to his house and he got this Korg O1W. It was like the coolest synthesizer at the time, and he was just recording the samples off of that onto his computer so that he could make music. And nowadays you would just use the synth, right? Because it's way more powerful. But it's just so, it was just a different way of doing things, but it was still very cool.
I mean, the thing with the synth is, like, back then, you could make music for yourself, and you could play it to yourself. Like, you didn't even have the space on your hard drive left to record the WAV file.
Right.
Let alone do anything with it. So it's just, like, now that it's possible to actually do music with the synth directly, and actually give the result to somebody, that's just changed the way that happens.
It's just a different freedom that you have now. So it changed things, right? It's not necessarily worse or... It's just different. It's not. That's the best way to describe it. But I actually feel like I feel more freedom musically these days than I ever did. But I just don't have the time anymore.
One of the things that stood out for me about early mods in the scene is that because, again, you were creating your own tools, a lot of the people who created the music were working within limitations and were sometimes programmers themselves. I feel like some tunes, including this one, it's like a programmer's music. Does that make any sense? It's like, you know what I mean? Like for some reason, this appeals to me more than something that would be like free flowing and, you know, more melodic or something, because I feel like a guy with my mindset made this tune. And by made this tune, I mean, not only did he compose it, but he made the tool that he made it in. And that's another reason I also desperately love the music in Crystal Dream 1, which we're not playing here. They're both programmer tunes, but they're good ones, and it's this melding of merging of left hemisphere, right hemisphere that makes this stuff. I feel like we've lost that. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing we've lost it. We've just simply changed and moved on, like with SoundCloud, and now people are free to make music completely unhindered by technical limitations. And some trackers got way better, I think, when they didn't have to adhere to some of these limits. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
People are still making music with fuzz or with trackers, especially techno producers actually still using
And
trackers.
for 4Ks and 64Ks, you still have a lot of limitations as a musician in the demo scene. And especially for 4Ks, there have been a lot of great synths.
It's just something you choose to do. It's not a technical, like, you have to do this or else you don't have anything you can give to somebody. Whereas now, you can't just choose, like, oh, I want to do something in the tracker, or maybe I like the tight timing or whatever. It's just... Yeah, it's just a bit different landscape now.
Yeah. Too many social media platforms. There's no one place for people to go to. I was really heavy in CompSys IBM PC demos because it was the only international forum. You remember that? Yeah. And now it's like Facebook news. Yeah, there's Facebook web forums. It's so splintered. I was complaining.
I wondered what happened to
this,
Gaffer.
actually.
Do you remember Gaffer?
I know.
Person?
Gaffer, it was an Australian guy, and he posted a lot on CompSys IBM PC demos.
Game network and stuff.
Yeah, I never seen anything from him again. And he was like, he didn't really make demos, but he would always contribute to every single discussion. He was always posting stuff there, and I remember the name, and it sticks with me.
Some people like to comment from the sidelines.
A quick thing, like, this is 93 virtual reality people playing right now. This is the virtual reality part of Crystal Dream 2.
Yes, absolutely.
I loved this one back then.
It was
because I had no idea how to do it. Like, I didn't know how to do Z-plane clipping, or any clipping really. I didn't know how to do 2D and just chop it off at the sides, but it didn't work when you wanted to fly through things. Things just exploded on the screen, and I didn't understand why. So this part always impressed me. Anyway, sorry.
No, the whole demo is. Some of the parts of this demo still hold up today. I think that Mandelbrot Zoomer is still the best that I have seen, even though we can do them real time now.
Doomsday by Complex.
Oh, okay.
It had.
I will check that then.
It had fractals in it, real time.
Yes.
Very impressive.
I'm not sure how real time that is actually. I think it might be partially or mostly pre-calculated.
Pre-calc?
But it
I
just
don't think
looks
so.
gorgeous.
I thought the point was to have it real time. But I don't know. I might be
Some
wrong.
of it, there's part of it that's real time. There's, I think if you start on Xbox, there's something like 5 minutes after you start where nothing happens.
That's funny.
Which is a sign, but I might be misremembering this.
Well, I know I'm not calling it the best, but it's still impressive 25 years later.
Oh yeah,
it's cool. I did want to go back to the music thing again real quick because we touched upon something a little bit, and the interesting part we were saying is you didn't have this way to distribute music before because you couldn't. There was no way you could distribute a big WAV file on the internet, and there's just not. The internet didn't even really exist in the beginning there, but the tools that were being written, they were being written by coders to be able to make music, and these musicians were just clamoring for this stuff because they finally had a way to do it. But the sad part was, I can tell you how many songs were lost due to bugs in the software. How many times CC Catch had to write the same music 10 times, because it crashed or the file got corrupted and oops, it's buggy, this isn't working, it has to change the song. So it was limiting in that regard, but it was neat being at the kind of the cutting edge there. It was the bleeding edge.
Didn't you tell me there were messages in the 669 composer software like press this key combo and go to hell or something like that?
Stuff like that, or do not press this button, do not press this. There were like lots of things like you must save this one, save this one, like because there were a lot of bugs, right? Exactly, and these guys dealt with it. They dealt with the fact that this had that because it gave them their creative outlet, and the end results were stand for themselves. It's pretty impressive what they were able to do with such crappy tools, but
why did you invent your own mod format? I mean, there are like 30, or not even 30, more than that, probably hundreds of different mod tracking formats, and they're listed. You know the format. Why did you reinvent formats?
I think that there were a lot of, in the beginning there weren't. I mean, 669 was was really the first 8-channel format that we had knowledge of. We didn't want to use mods at the time. I don't know if there were 8-channel mods at the time. They certainly were later, but mod files were very hard to deal with on a PC. So just the way that was formatted, the way that the samples were stored,
Big
the way the
endian
patterns
versus
were
little
stored.
endian.
Yeah,
this was before XM format, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
So 669 was an attempt at an 8-channel digital format. It wasn't, it wasn't perfect, but yeah, it was the beginning of that. And he when he designed that, 669 came, it was 8-channel digital, and then 670 came, and that was the digital NFM. And there was nothing else that did digital NFM, so you couldn't store that any other ways. It had to be custom.
Yeah.
And then later on, I think there was that multi-tracker MTM format that we had, but I think the fast tracker just got so popular once that came out, and XM was fine. So, and then you had
then fast tracker, and then
and then impulse tracker. Yeah. So so all those things there. I think that also the other thing was like the screen tracker S3M, but it was very secret. Like no one knew the format. You had to reverse engineer it, and it was back to that problem again. So when they finally released all of that, then it was a lot more available. So
to give Renaissance their credit, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I could go back, but I'm pretty sure Amnesia used a combination of Digi and FM before Scream Tracker 3 was released to the public. Scream Tracker 3 could do that, but you guys developed your own tracker and released a prod with it before Scream Tracker 3 was officially released. So that's another world first there for you.
Yeah, the tracker wasn't even. I think we came. Yeah, the tracker wasn't even available, so we had to make our own, and they did the same thing. But then it took them years before they finally released it. I don't remember when they released Screen Tracker 3 to the public, but they were using it for a while before that. So
I think around 94, 95 would have been. They did their demos in 92 and 93 with it, so there was like 2 or 3 years when nobody else could get it.
Yeah, and so we basically had no choice at the time but to do our own. So, and we never released that tracker either because it was so buggy.
Yes.
I think it's time that we move on to our final guest, which is Rig of farbrausch. Rig, you told me originally that you got into the demo scene via the player for Cubic Team.
That's when I started doing stuff. Yeah, it's like 98. So I was also big into mods. If you wanted to play music in the 90s on your PC, you really didn't have much choice. Yeah. It was mods or nothing. So I loved mod players and trackers. I tried to make some music and never did anything even remotely listenable. So we won't talk about that. But I love mod players, and Cubic Player was one of my favorite. It was probably my favorite player for a long time. And so in 1998, there was an open source release of it. And because the original author, Niklas Beisert, hadn't worked on it for a long time. I think the last real release was around 95 or 96 or something. And then it was just sort of lying fallow. And then Kebby was bugging him. Like, hey, if you're not going to work on this, just put it on the GPL, who cares? Especially since the player library for that was also released on Hornet, I think, as the indoor music system. What they called it, as an alternative to Midas and whatever.
Yeah,
whatever was around at the time. So this was one of the libs, and so this was a thing that they had already released in some fashion, and then Kebby was just bugging Niklas or Pascal, just like, hey, if you're not going to work on this anymore, this is still good. Just make the source available, and then we can do something with it. So he got him to put the source code on the GPL, and then we had this whole open Cubic Player thing after the source became public. And this was all some gnarly Whatcom-C code. Mm-hmm. OpenCP was weird. I had no idea how weird that code was when I was just using the player. So this thing was just internally structured, and the thing was this tiny stub loader, like a 30K EXE or whatever, that would just load various DLLs. And this was on a DOS, so it's okay, well, how does this work? And it required special linker tweaking with Whatcom-C to make that even work. Had this whole thing that was just loading these different modules, so it had the modular hardware drivers, whatever. These were all effectively DLLs, and it was just linking these together and just have its own operating system, the way DOS programs ended up being. This is a very interesting, crazy program. And like I was always fascinated with that, and I wanted to contribute. And then at some point, I hit up Kebby, like, "Hey, can I do something?" And not actually knowing much about module formats, and Cubic Player already supported pretty much everything anyway. I was like, okay, so what can I do? And I contributed a new online help system.
I remember a story from Kebby. He told us how you joined the group. You were this annoying kid who kept bothering them on the Cubic Player with stupid questions, and he would have to reply to them a lot.
Oh yeah.
That was Ring of farbrausch. Then he ended up joining Tech Lords and started actually doing some demo stuff.
So Tech Lords would have been around 99. Yeah, 98, 99.
I tried to have a Tech Lords demo here, but there are no video captures of it, unfortunately enough.
We did one 4K intro at Evoke.
And from what it said on Puet, it crashed your computer 10 times, and your hard drive, it destroyed your hard drive.
This was a thing, for some reason that was a quirk, like that machine was a pile of crap that ran on. Like this machine had regular overheating problems, and there was also something going on where if you did a DMA transfer and something went wrong, it wrote the results of that DMA transfer straight to the hard drive, which is not great if you want to keep your machine bootable. So doing the working on that intro, I had to reinstall Windows, I think 5 or 6 times.
So that was fun.
Yeah,
typical demo production then.
Anyways, we don't have a video for that, but we do have a video for one of your first entries that you did for farbrausch. So how did you get into farbrausch, and how did you end up doing this thing that I'm gonna start playing?
Farbrausch was a while later. First, 98, I was doing OpenCP and just dicking around there, whatever. That's how I got to know Kebby and everybody. And we were all hanging around on the same IRC channels and stuff. Then I was talking to Felix Stamke, TMB Inc., also on the OpenCP team, and like we were trying to make demos together as this separate group called Witchcraft, for which I wrote this whole demo system thing, just to get that set up. And I was still hanging around with the farbrausch people, and like with the people who ended up being farbrausch. At the time, they were elite group. And I wanted to make demos with them, and kind of just badgered my way into that by just annoying them and like, can I join? And eventually, like, yes, if you shut up.
You became famous for doing one of the best 64K compressions, Crunchy. Were you already working on that at the time?
The Crunchy stuff was way later. So even the stuff that was in FR08, that was a separate thing called FRP, the farbrausch.
Okay, so let's talk about this demo first and then move on to that. So what was this about?
This demo was just... this demo was released 3 times as farbrausch 2, 3, and 4. In various stages of completion. The second, the O2 version was released at all. Really, it just was completely broken. It was just a thing where you submit a half-broken executable to the compo, and then try to submit a bug fix later to extend your deadline by another couple hours, but it never materialized. That was O2. O3, I remember at Macro Symposium 2000, like we had just various effects from random coders, and I was sitting there and just throwing this stuff together. Just like I remember, like one of the ports that's calling up, I think the next port after this, where it's just skipping around. That was just synced to the beat. Oh no, I think we're already past that. Anyway, like I was there just going through the tracker, writing down the pattern positions of like where are the beats, because it's this kind of weird asymmetric pattern. Just writing down where the rows are and turning that into this timing sequence and so on. So I was doing a lot of trying to get the sync right, just throwing effects in there that we had. Like this here was done by Crash this was ported from a PS1 demo, PlayStation 1. This was done by Taurus. It's an effect he had lying around. He also had some other stuff lying around. Felix had some stuff. We had this scrolling image. This is this giant image by Critical, which is gorgeous. And then we just had to whatever. Yoda had written this particle effect scroller that's just doing like tons of sprites to do this kind of washing thing. I think it's inspired by the movie The Beach. So we just had all the stuff lying around, and we're just desperately trying to throw it all into this one demo.
So you were doing the hard part, which is getting the whole different code and getting it to work together.
We had this. Well, I was one of the people doing that. Yeah, like we're just like trying to just rough it in, get a timeline. And like that's part of that part that was there a bit earlier was just the random cube flying through the thing, through the scene. That's just completely unmotivated. That's just a placeholder scene. That's a placeholder scene for parts where we didn't have anything to put. And the fact that that's in the final demo tells you how unfinished this is. It's like we had parts of the timeline we literally didn't have any content for, and the rest was just like throw stuff in, just wherever. We have this 5-6 minute track, and we just need to fill it with content. It's kind of desperate. But yeah, that was probably the first quote unquote real farbrausch demo. And this didn't actually. I'm not sure. We submitted it to the compo and then retracted it, and I'm not sure. I don't think it got shown in the compo, but it did get put on the release FTP or something like that happened. Or maybe it was in the compo. I'm not sure. One of the two. Either way, like this was something we didn't want to release, and then it sort of got released in that state anyway.
Sounds pretty legitimate. Yeah, it shows that it was tried to release at Mega Symposium 2000, and it's marked as not shown. So apparently,
Yep.
Okay.
But it did get put on the FTP due to some screw up, and I was like, "Oh, what's this demo that nobody saw?"
And it's an untitled demo.
The 04 version was the fixed up version that had a bit better flow, still didn't have the missing parts or whatever, because at that point we're tired. That was at one of the underground conventions. I think it was UC4GW. Where that was finally released, then we just like, okay, we're done with this demo.
Okay, so next up we have FR06, which is Black 2000. This is actually a special version, the even darker remix.
Literally.
Yeah. So this is very emo goth kind of thing. So I guess influences from KB.
This is KB after a bad breakup. Yeah. Like, not making this up, that's the backstory for this demo. For the remix, anyway. Like, the first thing was just, so, for the earlier group that I was doing with Felix, called Witchcraft, I started doing this demo system thing that ended up being the farbrausch demo system, FBS32. So the FR3 just had a bunch of random DirectX code that was just a complete mess. And then I was like, okay, I need just, like, something to do the timing and so on, make it scriptable, make it not be so much of a pain. Because I did a lot of that in the previous demo, and I was like, I'm never doing that again. Then we started doing a bit more of a demo system. That was FBS32. This was based on something earlier that I'd done for the group Witchcraft.
But this was before Worksite, right? This is the engine before Worksite.
Long before. This is all scripted from a text file, and you just had C++ code for the different parts. But you could do the timing in the text editor while you had the mod file open. At least you could look at both of them at the same time and didn't have to run the demo, like fast forward to the right place.
There was no GNU Rocket at the time, so you couldn't use GNU Rocket
Nope.
to sync stuff.
Oh, that's a great idea. I mean, I wish I had something like this back in the
So like this is
you
like
built the infrastructure.
Yeah. The closest I got was
rubber animation. Like this here with the 3D scene. This is just one animation of that stupid ball falling down there and playing sequentially, and then we skip around in the timeline. Because this thing allowed just animating parameters and saying, oh, time forwards, then backwards, then forwards, then backwards, and kind of do that. So that was a step up from what we were doing earlier. And so this demo, Black 2000, was originally just something we did for Dialogas 2000. Just demo party in Jena, in Germany. And we just wanted to have something for the compo. So this was a bit, well, this is a lot more solid, really, than what we had for FR3. That at least had like common aesthetic and with the content all kind of fit, but it was still kind of thrown together. And then Kevy later did this remix using the same effects, the same content, but had
different colors, different sound.
And like the text overlays are new in this version. There's some new effects, and the whole thing flows a lot better than the original.
Yeah, I like the even darker remix better than the original one as well.
Here's like this is like revenge porn. This is Kevy's list of ex-girlfriends.
It's probably
And, like,
illegal
one
to
guy
do
that
this
sent
nowadays.
there,
Not subtle.
Yeah, he was not subtle at all. this effect was new for this version, for like even darker. Added.
Jigsaw
like
puzzle.
The remix only exists in the final version. It was not in the party. The remixes thing was just a random feature of the demo system, where you could have the main script file, and then you could have, like, for the demo data file, you could have a separate, like, this was just part of the pack file system. You could have a separate patch file that just replaced certain files. So this uses the main data file, and then you have a separate data file that just has a different script. That was how the remixes worked in the FES32 demos.
And this is Consume, which was an Evoke demo. This one
Yes.
I remember quite well, and we already played this on here
Yep.
before on the show, but we will play it again because it's awesome.
And the track is great.
The
By
track
Mem-
is
Tokyo Dawn
is
Records.
amazing.
Yeah.
What did I want to ask you? While Consume plays, can you tell us a little more about the process of farbrausch? Like, you had this engine initially. How did you end up deciding, let's remake our engine from scratch and do stuff that will make the best 64Ks ever?
That was really chaos. That didn't have, like, this is a completely separate development from me. So, like, at the time, we didn't have, like, a grand unified farbrausch thing. In fact, we never had. Like, people thought, like, oh, we were doing a workshop thing. No, at any given point in time, we had 3 different demo tools that we were all using. They were written by different people and didn't share any code. Like, pretty much throughout the entire time that I was active, we always had 2 or 3 of these going.
Okay.
Initially, it would be that these were also all written by different people. And by later stages, these were all things that Chaos, me, and Kebby had written and drawn and so on. But it was just like, we had the old version, and then we had the new version that we were using for some demos that wasn't really quite ready yet, but had different effects that we wanted to show off, whatever. So this was always, we just had way too many tech programmers doing techie things in their spare time. We had tons of demo systems flying around.
That's the big highlight of farbrausch, is that it's very known for having very elite programmers. At least at the time, you were like the top programmers that were active.
For example. Like, that's actually a great example. That's not the same demo system as the other 3 demos we just saw. Like, FR3 was one demo system, FR6 was another, this is a third. And this was written by Yoda. This was originally, I think, meant to be a GL thing, but this was just using 2D Direct Draw. And this is just these random photos here. If you want to, why do we have this collection of random kitsch item photos? This was a job he did. Like, he had to shoot for this catalog of these items. There was just for a catalog. These were on sale for somebody, and they paid him over the summer to shoot these 500 whatever random things that were in this catalog. And this is just, he did this on the side to earn some money. But then he had these photos, and they wanted to do something with them. And we decided to do this whole demo that just critiqued the whole idea.
About consumerism.
Just like these random kitsch, like tchotchkes, whatever bullshit items. Like, everything in this thing is kind of, well, bad.
Kitsch is the right word.
Yeah. So, you just had these photos. Like, I think the backstory is he got this early digital camera. Like, this is really expensive at the time. And this is like actually 320 by 240 pictures. That's what the camera shot. And the color was terrible and everything. But he has this digital camera, and then he did this job over the summer to kind of pay for it. Pay for the camera. And
that's
then
a good trade-off.
A collection of photos and did a demo with it.
I wanted to get you talking about Crunchy. Like, why did you develop Crunchy? Were you always interested in compression, or did you just see that you could optimize it somehow? What was the
short version? Yes, I was always interested in compression. Like, if you look at, like, in Hugi 98 or so, there's also like some random terrible articles by me about data compression. There were several data compression things in Hugi at the time, for whatever reason. Just several people who were interested in this were writing to that disk mag, and there was some exchange. We were all writing stuff. None of us knew what we were doing. Some of us more, some of us less. Like,
were there already like scientific white papers on compression techniques and stuff like that you checked at the time?
I didn't get the first part of the question.
Were there like scientific papers that you would be reading
yes,
and
there
understand
were
more about the state of the art? Because when Crunchy came out, it was better than commercial compression tools that were out there?
There were lots of papers out. I didn't read them much because I didn't understand them. The thing is, like, this is IEEE data compression conference stuff, right? So this is like done by electrical engineers. And like, if you were just fresh from high school and you've never seen a sum sign, and they're juggling terms like entropy around, you're going like, oh well, I'm out. So that's just. And at some point, that was, I think, around. Only really got comfortable with that. Like, this is Candytron. This is about the time when I got comfortable with reading papers. Because this has a mesh compression thing that's implemented from a paper, which is a giant pain. This was like the first time I actually like took a paper. This was just before I entered university. This was like the summer before. Or well, the spring before. So that was the first time I successfully implemented an algorithm from a paper. And it just takes practice, and you just kind of need to push through the pain. And
I guess know some good enough mathematics that you can understand what the hell they're talking about. At least my main problem with papers is usually that I don't understand the language that they're speaking. I mean, I know programming, I know mathematics, but it's just
like you just pick a lot of these things, and you just for most of it, you just ignore the formulas and so on. You try to catch the ideas of it.
Ah, okay. And then try to re-implement yourself.
This fuzzy idea of what they're actually talking about. Like if you read, like at this point, like if I'm reading into a new branch of things that I don't know about, like I don't even look at the formulas initially. I just queue up basically a bunch of papers from a subject. Just try to get a feel for like what are the things that you're talking about, what are the concepts. Then you try to wrap your hand around that. Once you have a basic idea of like what is that they even mean here, like what do these equations mean, only then do you actually look at them and try to understand in detail.
Yeah,
and
it's important.
Sense. It's important to look at the details, but initially, if you just have no idea, you just can't afford to get sidetracked by that. Just completely.
You have no idea how happy I am to hear you say that, because I struggle with the same thing.
Absolutely. Everybody has that. You just have to just ignore it. Just try to understand what they're even talking about. Get some basic idea about the lay of the land, and then only get into details way later. But yeah, compression was one of these things I was just sticking around. Like I couldn't read any of the papers, but the Hooey stuff was about right. It was just like, oh, how do I write a put bits function that just does variable bit I/O, and how to optimize that? It's like this weird 5-part series or something in Hooey, I think. It was a bit weird, but it was exactly the right thing for me at the time. Just playing around with these things. For the packers, the first thing I did was for FR8 was FRP. And that didn't have any custom packers at all. That was literally just taking the UPX, which had recently been open sourced, and plugging in the compression library from APAC.
Ah, okay.
Which was a DOS 16-bit exe packer that Jürgen Ips had done a lib for without source, just a Watcom C library that he used to do the compression. And the depacker was open source, and it was tiny, something like 160 bytes. Just this tiny depacker. That was the first version of FRP. It was literally just taking UPX and replacing the compression engine with APAC, which was better at that scale that we're at, and saved like a couple, like I think 1 or 2 kilobytes, and then I did some tweaks on the way the exe file was laid out that saved another 512 or 1 kilobyte or something. That was the packet that we used in FR8. And then Crunchy later was done, okay, let's take this APAC thing. This time, like, okay, fuck, I'm going to have to write my own packer for this. But I still took basic APAC encoding. It's exactly the same. It's just basic code structure. I wrote a packer for that and added a backend that used arithmetic coding to do like individual bits in there, which just allows you to...
You were already in university at this point and you were studying that stuff, or was this like hobby?
This would have been... So the FRP stuff was 2000, and I think the original work on Crunchy was 2001 or 2002 or so. This is between the university I started end of 2003. Yeah, October 2003. This was before university. But arithmetic coding was one of these things. Like actually, Charles Bloom, who is now one of my coworkers, whom I'm working on a compression product, like at my day job right now. He had this website that goes way back, like where he was like writing back in 1998. He was a game developer, and he was writing on random 3D stuff, but he'd also done data compression stuff. And he just had this website of random stuff and source code and whatever. There was this weird compression scene that I was into, and he had written about some of this stuff and so on. So I don't remember where I got this from exactly, but if you read that there was something better than Huffman coding called arithmetic coding, if you're curious how that worked,
yeah, he would want to check it out.
There were places you could go on the internet that would tell you how that worked. And there was, I think, LZMA, like 7-zip, had this binary arithmetic coder thing that I think that was actually my source initially for a lot of the stuff that went into Crunchy. So that's just take basically the arithmetic coder from 7-zip, which I didn't understand why that worked the way it did until years later. Plug it into this bootleg APAC, and that was Crunchy. That's the initial version of Crunchy. And that's pretty much still Crunchy. Later versions, much later, around 2006 or 2007. So this was really after we were seriously doing 64Ks. Had a different one that was based on context mixing, which in a stunning, by now will be to you, revelation. Like, I also didn't understand at the time. I just took the X7 source code, one of these neural network crazy compressors. Like, okay, like I sort of get how this works. I get the basic idea. I have no idea why this is as good as it does. I understand the ingredients here. I don't understand how this works. I don't understand what this weird neural network feedback thing is doing here, but it works great, so I'm just going to use it. So I started with Pac7, ripped out most of the parts because Pac7 was super slow, on the order of kilobytes a second to unpack. So even for a 64K, you would have to wait like 20 or 30 seconds to unpack, which is ridiculous. Ripped all that out, replaced it with a much simplified version that also used much less memory, and kept the dynamic context mixing, and that was the newer Crunchies. But I don't think we ever used that for any of our quote-unquote serious 64Ks because that was too late.
Yeah, but now 64K is coming back in fashion, so maybe people will start using Crunchy again.
I guess 4K is kind of played out now.
Yeah, well,
or at least
it
feels
never say
with the Trickster now, it's hard to do anything better for 4K. But for 64Ks, I think Crunchy is still better than Trickster.
Yeah.
That's my idea. I don't know. Yeah, am I wrong? If
different techniques for different size targets.
So Crunchy is, I think, better for the larger sizes. So the thing I said, like, context mixing things, there's just, you basically have several different models for how the data could go. You're just trying to predict the next bit. It's ultimately all you're doing. It's like that's either 0 or 1, and you have some probability for what you think that is. And what you're doing in these compressors, both Crinkler and the newer Crunchies, is you just have several different competing models that all make these predictions and have some certainty. And you're keeping track of how accurate all of these models have been. And you're mixing their predictions together, and that gives you a final probability, and that you use then to encode the next bit. You literally do this every bit. It's completely crazy. It's really slow.
It's insane.
So the Crinkler thing has these weights, but like how much do I trust these different models just set statically. During compression time, the compressor tries out a bunch of stuff, and I do mean a bunch of stuff. Picks which models are the best, and how do I best combine them. Outputs all these weights and which models to use, and just generates the right depacker for that, and that's what you get for 4K. For 64K, like Crinkler has to work with a depacker that's like something like 220 or so bytes, or 250. So there can't be anything there really. It has to be ultimately the things the computer does has to be super simple, and it's doing a lot of this work per byte, but it's still super simple. Crunchy has a way larger depacker. It's something like 1.5 or 2 kilobytes of code. The newer versions anyway. The older versions were much smaller. They were like 300 bytes. So the newer versions do a lot more sophisticated stuff, and they can't afford to just not just have a static mix of like, oh, do this with that weight and do this with that weight. Crunchy actually monitors as it's going, like which of its models are performing well right now. And if that changes in the middle of the data, it can adjust its weighting, which does give you some compression. It just makes it more expensive. The other thing that Crunchy also does that Crinkle doesn't is Crunchy has a separate pass in there that knows how x86 code is laid out, like the actual instruction encoding, and just moves the data around a bit and separates it into separate streams. So like, oh, the opcodes are one thing, and they have their own history, and like jump addresses are just very different, like their addresses and their relative offsets from the current location. So they have very different statistics from the opcode bytes, which have very different statistics from the bits that encode, like, oh, which registers am I using in this instruction? So there's all these different fields in x86 instruction stream that just have very different statistics. And Crunchy has this separate pass that just kind of whittles them out and separates them into different streams that are compressed separately. That's another source of why Crunchy has this like 2 kilobyte or so depacker. So you spend something like 800 bytes on that, but it's worthwhile because it saves you a couple kilobytes of code.
Yeah.
Like that's how much smaller the code gets, so it's a good deal overall.
Great.
So
that was great insight into packing in general. So thank you for that.
By the way, like none of the stuff that I've talked about that is in Crunchy, it's all stolen. Like even the stuff about separating the thing into different streams was based. Like that was not my idea. That was something that Chaos was sticking around with, but he didn't have the compression know-how to pull through on that. Mm-hmm. So I just took that initial, like he had written some approximate disassembler for x86, and I just got that code from him and I tweaked it to make it work, but that was not something I wrote initially. It's all stolen, man. Like the final version of that is pretty different, and I feel like I can claim ownership at this point, but certainly not that started.
You make the great insight into the imposter syndrome thing. You know, some people think, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. You know, I just hack this thing together, and you know, you have the best packer in the fucking market, and you're just saying, yeah, it's all glued together stuff from different places.
You just get better at winging it. Eventually,
winging it.
You're just world league at winging it.
Well, sometimes having the knowledge to know what to piece together and how is just as important as writing the pieces.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's move on with the interview. Now we're actually playing a demo. Well, we're not playing because I haven't pressed play yet, but this was one of the first demos that I've seen from farbrausch, and I was like, they're making artistic stuff as well now. And from what people told me, this was because of you. You thought of having this direction with alternative music and stuff. So what can you tell us about Cargo
It started with a track. Ronnie had done this track. He's credited as Klaus Kerner because he's a GEMA member, which is like the German equivalent of ASCAP. It's the collecting society for music artists. And GEMA is just complete batshit crazy about this. So they want a cent or two paid out to the artists
for every time they play this.
Per download. And they
so we just make up a fake name.
So we just made up a fake name that this music is credited to. I think he's now left the society, so we can't say this now. But he had done this great track that we wanted to use, which is weird. Is it accurate to label this dark ambient, drone, whatever? Not really. It's a bit. It's a dark electronic track. Now I'll not try to.
Yeah, it feels more techno than it feels ambient, but it really has the dark vibe into it. So.
Yeah. Anyway, we had this track and really wanted to do something with it. And the background thing, the green stuff that's playing there is just it actually looks way clearer now than it used to. They can sort of see what's going on now. This was some attempt at just ray tracing a high field.
This is ray tracing?
Didn't look like it.
Yeah.
It's ray tracing a high field. It's based off the part. I was trying to clone the 3D three-directional landscape thing, which is ray tracing. And I was trying to like, how does this even work? And I was really trying to make this happen. And this one is completely buggy, and it was also too slow. If you're running this on a modern machine now, the frame rate is high enough that you can actually see, at least early in the part when you don't see the gunk on top of it, the red stuff. You can actually sort of see that it's supposed to be a landscape, but it was just too slow and it didn't work right and just had a bug and that I never found.
But it looked great.
The thing there was, because it was too slow, the initial thing I did was just like, don't trace every pixel, every frame. Just trace like some random subset basically of pixels, just some scan pattern in every frame. And then you get this weird, interesting looking dithering effect. And I just like the aesthetics of it. And especially once, in the initial version, the frame rate of this was relatively low. So the dithering thing kind of dominated the look of this. I was like, okay, this is still broken, but now I'm kind of digging it. Because with the dither and like there's these weird streaks that are going on there that were added separately. Just like, if we lean into that aesthetic, that's actually something that is interesting to me. So this is like this monochrome green thing in the background. It's this landscape and the weird scan pattern you can sort of see streaking through there. It's just clearing random blocks to black, so that when it's tracing the pixels, so you sort of see them appear in this weird line pattern thing that's going on. And then I was like, okay, that's an interesting background, but now we need to put something on top. I'll not talk about the ghastly scene poetry. The less said about that, the better.
Scene poetry.
3D thing there. That's just some random growing mesh thing. This was recreating and trying to recreate an effect that Chaos had written back for FO3, way back at this point. This was like years later, that I really liked, but that he had lost the code for. This is some weird thing that was just it had this net thing of mushrooms that were connected, and it would spawn new mushrooms, and then vines would grow through them, and I really liked that thing. The mesh thing was not that. This mesh thing was trying to be that, but miserably failed. It was one of these things just lying around on a hard drive. It was building a 3D mesh, like growing different pieces, and it didn't really look like anything. But it got interesting once you put some random texture on it. Then I tweaked the colors and use additive blending. That's how you get this weird gradient from green to yellow to red, purple to white. Just making the colors just right so that it's adding a lot of bursts, so you go from green to yellow, and then ramp up green a bit less, to blue finally, so you get the purple and goes to white. So that was just a bit of tweaking the colors, and then put all these together. It's like, okay, this kind of screensaver-esque, but like kind of interesting, and it fits the track. That's the demo.
Okay. I really like how you explore the whole technical side, but end up just making an abstract visual thing about it, you know, with the leftovers of codes and effects.
It was just one of these things where just had these ideas of like, okay, this is like some effects we wanted to do that didn't really work out, but like still were kind of cool. That was one of these things where, okay, this is not A-list material, but it's something that we want to do something with. And then we make a demo out of it, and we had this track lying around. farbrausch has always had a great supply of, at least at the time, very active musicians. They were always producing new tracks. We always had an embarrassment of riches, where we just could like, oh, like, Ronnie just did a new track, it's awesome. Let's make a demo out of it.
Yeah,
like that's a pattern that's actually going on through this list. Right now we're seeing Patient Zero, which actually has a composed-to-fit soundtrack. Most of the demos on this list, or at least half of them, were just tracks we had, and we're trying to build a demo around. Especially we did a lot with Panic's backlog later. The tracks he had done years ago that we kind of liked, and we just wanted to do a quick demo. I was like, oh, there's this cool track by Panic we can use.
Yeah. Just reuse. So about this demo specific, this was actually made by Visualize using the Workzoig tool, which, well, if you don't know Workzoig, then you've been living on a cage. It's on a cave, I mean. It's very famous tool by farbrausch. You contributed some modules to Workzoig, from what I understood. It's mostly chaos work.
Workzoig, I was one of the primary authors, like Werkzeug 3 at this place. This is a Werkzeug 3 intro.
Okay, so it was like a remake.
I was not involved with. Werkzeug 2 is not really a thing. Kind of. Well, no, sorry. Werkzeug 2 is a thing. I was also not involved with that. Then there were some intermediate stages called the the FR8 thing was done with a separate tool yet again called Generator. It was Net Generator 2 that was kind of the original Werkzeug. And then there was Gen 3 that was used for Candytron, which turned into Werkzeug 3.
Okay.
Which was used for this.
Which then Visualize reused several times on several different
Visualize, we just got in
intros.
touch. Like, he was doing a lot of demos with HowJob, and then they kind of stopped doing things. He still wanted to do demos. He contacted us, like, hey, can I use this to make demos? I'm like, sure. And then we had done, years ago, for TPOLM, 2002 or so, I think, done a demo that used anaglyphic 3D called Doppler effect.
And this demo was for a specific demo for a specific party where they had
Simulatio
featured 3D for Simulatio 3D, I believe. So
I was just going to ask if this is real 3D or not.
This
Like,
is
is
real,
it
like
real
this is
anaglyphic?
3D, and if you have red cyan glasses, it works.
Cool.
So we had a thing that we done years earlier. That was the Doppler effect thing. Where we were just like, oh, we want to do a 3D demo anaglyphic, and we just got everybody glasses. Like, just ordered a batch of these printed foldable glasses, handed them out to everybody at the party for the demo, for the intro competition, just so they could see the intro. So we had that code sort of lying around, and then I just spliced that code back into Werkzeug fairly quickly. Something like, we knew Simulatio 3D was coming up, Visualize wanted to do a demo, or actually intro, and it's like, hey, we have this code lying around, so whatever, just do it. And just took that old code, put it into Werkzeug pretty quickly. This was like a weekend or so. And then gave it to Visualize, like, here, you do you. You have the tool now, you can make this work. And he did make the demo, which is cool.
Okay, this is another farbrausch demo. This one, was this Werkzeug as well, or was this hard-coded?
This was Werkzeug 4, early Werkzeug 4. I said we did a new tool for every couple demos.
New demo, new tool.
Yeah, sort of. Like, we get usually 4 or 5 demos out of a tool.
So what was the point out of this? You just wanted to make a very strange looking cube, or did you have a concept at all, or?
This thing that you're looking at right now was the original idea. So this is just basically a meta balls kind of thing. That is applied to some, this grid stuff that you see is some actual 3D geometry. And then it's like the distance functions used now and for ray tracing and 4K intros and so on. Like the meta balls are a distance function thing. And what
this is completely
intersecting
shader? Is this completely shader?
Yeah. Okay. This is it's just drawing the actual 3D geometry, and the shader intersects that with this weird metaball distance field thing.
Okay.
And so the real geometry ends up getting clipped by the distance field thing, which gives these weird effects. So the thing we're actually drawing is just a grid. It's just a grid of planes. And then there's the vertex shader that kind of makes them wobble a bit in this case. And then there's the discard shader that cuts off the pieces that we don't want to show right now. And then we can throw textures in there and so on. That's like all of the demo uses this effect. But it's all just based off basically cutting off pieces of an actual 3D mesh that we don't want to see right now. And parts of this use a completely irregular grid. Like most of the early parts you said. Parts are more irregular, just have weird planes sticking all in places, and that's using an early version of something that was written for Rove, which is in the playlist, so I'll probably talk about it then. So that was could take an arbitrary mesh and would do a space partition. And then we use the space partition to generate an actual mesh with these actual planes in it that now have this weird interior structure that's kind of interesting if you do this clipping thing on top.
Yeah.
And then you have the problem that what are you actually drawing? The 3D geometry here for this stuff never really exists. The thing you're drawing is just a completely irregular grid, and then the shader clips off pieces of it. So you can't do any good, nice lighting and so on, because it's all complete garbage.
I think it looks already pretty good on its own. I don't think you need extra lighting on it.
The drawing just has nothing to do, you can't do any light mapping or whatever on it, or regular lighting, because it's just all in the shader. So then there's some post-processing SSAO stuff applied to this to get the look. Like SSAO was like everybody's kind of down on it. I'm sort of too, but it was the right choice for this because we just really didn't have the right thing for this.
Looks pretty good. I really liked it at the time.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite ones.
This is a one effect demo, very classic one effect demo, and it came out really well. This was just something that Chaos had done, and we just kind of took that one effect and tried to do everything we can with it, and it came out pretty well. And it was just using an older track by Panic that we had lying around.
Nothing wrong with one effect demos.
Yes.
Yeah. One trick ponies. If they look
One
this
trick
good,
pony.
it's fine.
Yes.
And this is Rove that you were talking about earlier. Rove
Yes.
that you were talking
This
about
thing here
earlier.
is just a weird terrain mesh that Adam, built for us. It's all handcrafted. That's the landscape and so on you see later in the first. The first part is just a 3D kaleidoscope effect. Like, it's technically pretty simple. It's again doing the same idea, but you're just drawing the whole thing multiple times and just cutting off pieces of it at the planes where the kaleidoscope meets, and you're rotating them against each other, and you get this effect. It's not technically complicated; it just looks great. This was one of these things. Like Rove is a super high poly demo. Like, this was multiple million polygons per frame. At the time, it was like ridiculous because we weren't even running that high res, but it was like, whatever, we're throwing geometry at it and we're just using this high res art. We're not doing LOD because fuck it, computers are fast. And then doing stuff with this. So we had this landscape thing, and we had a couple things we wanted to do with it. The basic idea was we have these the basic idea was to do a nature documentary. So the inspiration was Planet Earth, the BBC series. A nature documentary for this alien planet that had these weird life forms. So the choice of camera angles, they do this big thing where they fly over some crazy mountains in the tropics. You have these giant waterfalls, and it just looks gigantic. The camera angles, the whole construction of the world are sort of inspired by that. And then we had these very intensely abstract creature designs that were just doing this flapping thing and just a sine curve. We have these Lissa-Ju things. We have this thing with the pulses going through it. So it's like the idea was to make these abstract life forms, but to mimic some of the movements and the feel of a nature document. That was the basic idea.
It's very impressive. We ended Mind Candy 3 with this. So we thought it was a fantastic end to the presentation.
It's a very chill demo.
It is. It's a good track.
I didn't like it initially. But later I changed my mind. Yeah, this is like, you can see like all these are just, the idea there's like to take classic demo scenes like this is basically like a plasma effect, right? And apply it to the 3D surface.
Applied to a height field.
Yeah, and then have these birds flying around, and it's just like, basically, what if this thing was a real world and it's inhabited by like demo creatures and whatever?
Demo creatures.
Pay attention, by the way, like there's the Howjob logo in a second, and that's just papering over a hole in the mesh. You can sort of see the gap there. Like,
we have a hole here. Let's put greetings.
Yeah. This thing is the greeting scene. This is just multiple copies of this mesh stacked together, and it's just a 3D infinite zoom, which is another thing that Fiverr really wanted to do. Like this demo was very much his idea, and like all the stuff about the nature documentary, that was all him. So this is trying to do a 3D infinite zoom, and this stuff here you see, like the debris kind of floating around. It makes absolutely no sense, but this was actually made by taking a planet-sized thing, mesh, in Werkzeug, actually blowing it up into pieces, which was where the whole plane cutting thing I mentioned before was written for. So it's literally like, we had done this early in Debris, where it was kind of faked, and this time we actually cut stuff into pieces, and just like, we take all the pieces and form them into an asteroid belt, which is a complete waste of time because you can't actually tell the difference from it being faked.
But you know.
We didn't do physics though.
So what's the concept behind demos? Like usually someone has an idea and the other guys help out, or
it's really different.
It's different for every prod and every group, really.
Yeah, I mean with farbrausch, usual thing it's like it's run like an artist commune usually. So one guy has an idea and it tries to recruit others into his efforts, like on the strength of the idea, basically. I'm getting a bit quiet now because like this next part here with fishes is awesome, and that's inspired by an actual scene in Planet Earth, where there's these fishes flying around, and then the light changes, and suddenly they're all reflected. That is just a scene from Planet Earth that we're very intentionally trying to copy. And yet another infinite zoom, so I feel comfortable talking here. So the idea is that somebody has like basic idea for a demo, and then we have various stuff lying around, and everybody tries to chip in. Like the guy we give the quote-unquote director credit is usually the one who is the driving force. So like this, in this case, it's Fiverr. The United States of America, as he calls himself. No relation.
For the elite group.
I love that handle.
These different pieces, it's again a 3D infinite zoom, so this is all the same planet every single time, just differently rotated. It's one 3D thing. And it is really infinite, like you can just keep zooming into this however long you want. Like there's actual code in there to make that work. And I think that's credits now, yeah.
So Rick, what demo are you like most proud of out of all the things you contributed to?
Overall, it's probably still Debris. Simply because it was like there's a lot of like it was the best demo ever, whatever. I don't care. I really don't care whether people think it's the best demo ever. It's one of the best experiences of my life, because what happened after Debris came out, Breakpoint 2007, was insane. People went crazy after this demo was played.
Did you get more feedback from Krieger than Debris?
From outside the demo scene, maybe, but like, Krieger was tucked away into the game compo, which, like,
but I mean, on terms of exposure and websites and people talking about it, he had a lot more
like,
outreach impact.
Yes,
than
but
Debris.
the thing that happened with Debris is that you have this, like, this was Breakpoint 2007, so we're in the sports hall. I was one of the organizers, so I was sitting like right at the top of the very thing, along the roll with the beam team, with projection equipment. You can see the whole hall. And I mentioned this earlier, like if you have people like, if you get scene applause early in, that's a good sign. And like with Debris, like we have this initial, like the initial sequence of just a couple of establishing shots of the city. The very first scene where anything actually happens is just this weird parking place thing with a cube that shattered in pieces, which is just so like that's not even a lot of pieces. Like it's not actually that impressive anything. Like
it
we
looked
did
good.
City, the cube blows up and people were applauding, and it's like, this isn't even the good part. This is gonna be crazy. Yeah. And what follows after is one of the best 10 minutes of my life ever. Like, without question. Because, yeah, people were cheering. They were going crazy over the hunt part with, like, big text rolling through the city, tearing up the street. People went crazy over that.
I guess we have to show Debris after all. I was trying not to show it because
Here's the live version.
Everyone already knows it, but I mean, this was the last demo, so I guess we can show it now.
The one with the live soundtrack is definitely my favorite because you can see the response. And that was just, yeah, that was just great experience overall. Yeah. And that's probably the best response I've had to a demo ever. And that just that memory of the competition, then after, like, people were kind of like, everybody was in a great mood. Like, holy shit! Like, this will sound terrible now, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. Like, I always wondered, like, watching demos like Second Reality, like, how would it have been had I actually been there and seen this live? And with Debris, you had people like going crazy and cheering and so on, and like that moment, like you see this at the end where people just go completely crazy at the end, start chanting and so on, and I was just sitting there, huh? So that's what that's like.
It's a shame that on the old demos there wasn't like live capture of the audience reaction to the demos, because there are a lot of epic compos that you only hear about and watch the results. Like at the party 97, they say that it was a crazy compo, stuff like that, and you end up really curious on how the people were reacting and the whole feel of the actual compo.
And that's also part of it is because there is the live audio, like the video with live audio, so you can actually rewatch it now, like see where the people were applauding and so on. Like, it's a really great memory. And like I've had many demos that I was really happy with. This is the only one where we've gotten that kind of response we were actually there for. Like Kriga made bigger waves overall, and it went over all the game websites, but that's just people writing about it on the internet. It's just not the same. It's just like if you're there in a hall with 1,000 people, they're just cheering and going crazy. It's like people reporting about it in the press or whatever, writing about it, just doesn't feel the same because it's also so far removed.
It's because you're being judged by your peers and they enjoy it, and it's
also the main thing is just the immediacy, right? Like with Krieger, we did this thing and it was a hit at the party, and people thought it was cool, and then a week later somebody finds it and you get a big hit on your on your website hit counter, which you still had in those days, and then somebody writes it up and then somebody emails you and so on. But this is all staggered over multiple weeks, right? So it's like it's this whole thing like, oh, I did something cool, and periodically people are reminded like, oh, look at this cool thing, and you're like, yeah, I did that. That's very nice. But like this thing of just having a hall of people there immediately cheering is just a far more visceral thing.
Yeah, the immediate response.
I mean, it's one thing to know in the abstract that whatever, there's 1 million people in the world who saw this, and a lot of them thought it was really great, and that's nice to know. But like in terms of feeling, I'd rather take the 1,000 people cheering that I'm in the same room right now, because that feels just so much more real.
Yeah, it's like it's the difference between going to a live concert and listening to the music on your stereo at home.
Yeah,
right. It's like there's a totally different feeling when you have a whole, arena full of people that are watching the same thing you are and reacting to it.
You can sometimes actually feel the applause, like the punch of the volume actually hits you.
Yep.
People in the chat are asking if Dark City was an inspiration for Debris. I know that it was. Fiverr2 already mentioned it before.
Yes. The main inspirations, there's a video by group agency, don't know, Pleix, Pleix, called Sometimes. That was part of the inspiration for this. The floating credits in this part here is straight from Panic Room, which will not be surprising to anybody who saw that movie in the opening credits. That's a very intentional nod. What other things are there? There's a couple.
Didn't know that.
The racing bridges and so on were original. Like that was just a thing that Fiverr always wanted to do. I don't think that was inspired by anything in particular.
That's weird enough that it's very Demoscene.
Yes. It's also just a cool visual, right?
Yeah.
Shout out to Equinox. That was just a throw-in gag, making that was just riffing off an intro they had done earlier.
Yeah, with the hanging things.
Yeah.
Equinox.
That was an Evoke invite they did. There was this Kings of the Playground, I think is the name.
Yeah.
Like that shout out as to love. What else? There are a couple others, but I'm blanking on it right now.
So Daredevil, if you haven't followed the demo scene, what do you think about all these more recent demos?
I've seen a few of these, but not all of them. But I mean, it's just impressive how much. In the beginning, it was just about, hey, look, I need to show you what kind of things I can do on this hardware, right? Because it's not very fast, and I don't know what I can do. But these have a lot more thought into the actual story, and the production value is there's a lot more to it now. It's almost the same evolution that happened with games. You know, where before it was just a very simple, one guy could write a game, and now it takes just a massive amount of, you need to develop tools.
I will say that this demo almost killed us. This was
I could imagine.
6 months.
Yeah.
26 months is too much for a demo.
And what type of tools did you have to develop for this? I mean, there's just so many tools.
How many months?
26.
Oh, yeah, that is a long time. Yeah, that's longer than we took, yeah.
But that's the other thing. It's like, that's probably part of why this experience of the reception of this is so intense. We were 2 years into this, 6 weeks before the demo party. Did not have a demo. Like, this whole crumbling thing wasn't in there yet. That was a thing we came up with at a meeting 6 weeks before the party. Like, we were just like, oh god,
let's make the whole city crumble. Yeah, sure, that's doable in 6 weeks.
The original idea was something very different. The original idea was still of the city being destroyed, but it was intended to be in a very different fashion. The idea was that you'd have this complex layered thing where individual buildings would like glitch out in a weird video effect kind of way. Like, you have this 3D scene and individual buildings would have like MPEG artifacts or get blurry and so on. All of this got written. We had this crazy compositing system. The complexity of that was just completely nuts because this was done in hardware where we couldn't do even the primary material shader for this required multiple passes over the scene because we just didn't have the shading power and the GPU power at the time to do it quote unquote all at once. So it was completely crazy. And then we wanted to do these weird 2D video post-processing effects on it, and just like, we had this super complex idea and it just didn't pan out at all. And we tried to make it work for almost 2 years, all the while Fiverr kept building more of the city and had more of these set pieces and so on. Like, okay, like I want to do this sort of angle here, but we don't really have like the growing pipes and so on. That was something we had early. The racing bridges was something we had. But the idea of the city dissolve was like the big climax was intended to be something very different. Where it's just like, it's like this weird Matrix-like world. That's the Dark City inspiration that was even more explicit back then. Of just have individual buildings glitch out and then the whole world kind of just is this weird illusion that dissolves. That was the original idea. And that did not work at all. And we were 2 years into this demo, and at this point we're thoroughly sick of it. Because we've been working on this for 2 years and we didn't feel like we had anything to show for it. We didn't have a soundtrack yet. In fact, the soundtrack, like, Fiverr never even saw the demo with soundtrack before the compo. Ever.
Jeez.
It just, like, he saw it with sound the first time in the compo.
When we had Ronnie on the show, he was talking about that, like, yeah, I would just make... I had never seen the demo, and I just did the sound, and the guy that made the demo never saw it with the sound, and we just saw it on the big screen, and everybody went crazy about it.
So, Ronnie had a basic timeline. He didn't have the full version of it. So he did have basically a rough cut, but, like, not the way it appeared. Like, he had something from earlier where the effects weren't really in and so on. So yeah, that was just that meeting 6 weeks before the party was pivotal, because that's when Chaos did that effect. It's okay, what if we ditch this whole weird compositing 2D effect glitch thing that we can't make work and just do something 3D crumbly that's just like, okay, we do some geometry, we already have this particle system, like we had this 3D particle system with the cubes flying around. There was an idea we were already exploring at the time. We later did more of that with Momentum, and some of our later demos did more of this, like, hey, what if we did classic particle system things, but with actual 3D objects, which looks great, and like which we always wanted to play with. That started in Debris. So the crumbling thing was just this thing that happened at that meeting. Or like he had written it like the day before or so, and just gave the version to Fiverr, like, hey, try this. Can we do something with this? And then it's like, yes, I think this works. And from then on, it kind of clicked. And I don't remember the rest of those 6 weeks leading up to the party, except that I was frenzied. At the same meeting, I was writing, like, we were having video memory problems. It was just too many textures, and I wrote this compressor for DXT textures that was just needed to be fast because of rendering the pre-calc. So we didn't want it to like add an extra minute to the loading time. So I did this stuff, like all the stuff that later got released elsewhere, all came together in the last 6 weeks. By the end of it, we were thoroughly sick of the demo.
Yeah, I can imagine.
This thing is just like, we're like, oh, this isn't what we wanted to do.
It's very impressive work.
Never even seen it with a soundtrack. This is such a mess. It's gonna suck, but whatever, we're gonna release it anyway. So it's just, we want this out of our lives. And then we get to the story I just said, where you play it, and like 1.5 minutes in, people start applauding and like, oh, they really like me.
Okay, let's. People are suggesting that we watch the live version, so at least we will play at least the end of the live version, so we can see the crazy applause that it resulted on. I got a new subscriber out of it, apparently, so welcome to the thing. Let's skip to 8 minutes, the end of the demo.
Sure, I will own up to the fact, by the way, that we're number 23 in playlist order is not a coincidence.
Okay, so this is 8 minutes at the end of the demo, and you'll see the crowd reaction at the end of the whole thing. Or here, at least.
There's a big one when the initial hum thing is, and then there's, yeah, like once this ends and it noise, I think there's... Yeah.
Yeah, they're already cheering.
They were cheering solidly for the last 2 minutes, and then this happened. Which is
fantastic.
Way more impressive if you're there in person. And then the chanting starts. Now, a couple seconds now. There.
Hund.
Yep. So, this was the thing that happened, and it's a very cool memory. This is a cool thing to happen to you. It's definitely one of those bucket lists, if you can ever make it happen.
Yeah. Hey, we gotta get to work.
Yeah,
Yep.
you only have to work 2 whole years.
Another
Only have to
couple
get a
of years,
team
yeah.
of 5 very talented people and work 2 whole years on a demo, and that could be
yeah.
you.
That's
then
the
that
thing,
could be-
though.
that's exactly
You can
right, that
Also,
could
have
be
the
you.
thing where you work on something for 2 years, and at the end it's just a disappointment.
That can also happen.
So it's great that it didn't happen then.
Okay, I think it's time for us to wrap up Mr. Demoscene Theater Season 2, Episode 10. It's been a great show. Thank you guys so much for being around. I wanted to ask one last question to you guys. What are you working on next? Or are you planning on working on something next? I guess Trickster first. So what are you up to?
The 8088 crew is working on another demo. I am only very peripherally involved. I haven't written anything for it yet. My next project is going to be something that assists the vintage gaming community. So I'll announce that when it's finished.
Okay, alright. What about you, Daredevil? You're a bit out of the demo scene. Are you having any plans on doing a comeback or showing up at a demo party?
I would love to get involved. Right now I got 2 small children, so that's kind of my focus right now, but I think I'm more focused on music at the moment, so I think it would be great to get back into it, and I'm definitely following. I keep in touch with Jim, and I'm always paying attention to what he's doing, and I kind of live vicariously through him because he's the one I think who's doing all the really cool old school stuff that I'd like to be working on. So maybe one day. For now, I'm just going to kind of keep him watching from the sidelines and enjoy this kind of stuff because it's pretty cool.
Okay. What about you, Rick? What are you up to?
Not much to do with demos right now.
Just work
Basically,
optimizing engines for people.
Just middleware I'd mostly, and stuff I can't talk about.
Yeah, NDA.
Yeah.
But you were saying your Rogue came out and?
Yeah, Rove was Rove I was only half involved with. I did a lot of the work initially, but wasn't in there for the finish at all because the summer before I was just okay. This was another of these experiences where it was intended to be a quick demo and then it dragged out for over a year.
That kind of happens.
Yeah, but after Debris, I was kind of burned out on that. And like that summer, I had the realization, like, wait. Like we just had regular meetings to make that demo at my place. and I was fine with hosting them. But like at some point during that summer, I just realized like other people like go to work during the week and then look forward to doing something fun during the weekends. Whereas like, at that point, it's like we are doing the demos on the weekend, and like I was looking forward to doing the weekends. Like, oh, like Monday, it's just regular work, and not this super stressful extra work that I'm also doing with these like goals that keep shifting, and we don't really know where we want to go. And it's just like it was just more stressful than my actual day job. And that was and at that point, I just decided, okay, like this is not actually good for me. I need to stop doing this. If like, it's fine working really hard if you feel like this is a fun time, but I wasn't having a good time. It was just like it was just more work.
You have to find the fun in it again. You have to find the fun in it again.
Yeah.
And then,
so that's when I
will
kind of noped out on that, and I haven't done a demo since. That might change. I'm not ruling it out, but I just
you're taking a little holiday. That happens a lot in some demo sceners. I mean, you do a big production, and you're like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna take it easy. And at some point, you might try a new effect, or you might, or someone might give you an idea, and you're like, I might help you out with this, and you get sucked back in. Into the.
I'm not ruling it out.
Can't stay away.
It might absolutely happen, but like I'm not currently working on anything.
Okay, that's fair enough. What about demo parties? You're now in the US. Are you visiting stuff or not really?
I haven't been in a while, so this is mostly limited now by when I'm actually in Europe. I've gone to US demo parties.
You probably should, though. Like, aren't there any demo parties close to you?
Not really. Pacific Northwest. The closest would be if they're doing NBC, but that's kind of semi-commercial. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Okay, well, fair enough. So obviously there should be more demo parties on the United States. There's clearly a shortage.
I'm not sure. Like, it's easy to say that there should be more demo parties, but there's no good if there's 100 demo parties and like there's 2 people going to each.
Yeah,
you need to kind of match.
Yeah, you need an active scene to have the parties.
Exactly. So I think the number of demo parties is about right for the size of the US demo scene. It's just the US needs more of a demo scene.
Yes,
and then the parties will come.
Okay, so that's another very important question that we haven't addressed. How do we get more people on the US interested in making demos, or is it a lost cause and, you know, they will find it if they will find it?
That's a very 90s question to me, because I think at this point it should be just how do we get more people interested in demos? Because it feels like it's getting more and more insular. Like
if you check the numbers, there are still demos being released, and the demo parties are pretty much the same number. It hasn't really changed that much. In some countries there are even more activity than there used to be, so
absolutely, but still, like, there's this disturbing trend where for the past at least 10 years it feels like the average age of people in the demo
increasing
scene has been going up by something like 0.8 years for every year.
So that's because in the 90s you didn't have a lot of different outlets for a lot of the stuff that we do in demos, and now modern times, if you want to do music, you don't go anywhere near a tracker. If you want to do 3D programming, you can just play around in Shader Toy or what's that?
Processing.
Thank you, processing. So there's all these different areas that you can go into. It's you know, the scene isn't shrinking, but it's getting older.
Yeah.
Okay, the scene is dying. That's the conclusion for today.
Well, we are dying. Oh god.
Well, to be fair, our life expectancy in our generation is like something like 80 years.
It's increasing,
so we're now in our 30s and 40s. So, like, even if there's no new sceners, we got at least another 40 years of increasingly senile demos to look forward to.
I can't wait.
That's very interesting. I remember when I was traveling, doing interrails with Melvin, we would talk about how will retirement home with demo sceners be like. I mean, when we are all old, will there be like a retirement home where sceners will prefer to go to because there are other sceners there and they can, you know, share a culture of some sort, which you wouldn't get on a normal retirement home?
Will there be fist fights? between two octogenarians.
Be very
arguing about
competitive.
Triton versus Future Crew.
You destroyed my Amiga. I'm gonna kick your ass. You know how much work? You know how much work I got to get that hard drive working again.
It's something to look forward to.
Yeah, I think if I had an argument with someone over a rotozoomer, I'd probably have to look for a change of lifestyle.
Or a chessboard effect.
Like arguing about
Anyways.
rotozoomers is not really a thing anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Well, I don't
bring
know.
it back.
You know, do you do it in sectors to take advantage of the caching, or? I'm kidding.
So let's wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for coming. Trickster, Daredevil, and Rig. This has been a great show. Longer. I think this is the longest show we have done ever. But
Holy shit,
it's a
4 hours,
weekend.
yeah.
It's a weekend. Who gives a shit? Normally people start going away, and that's like my notification that I should probably wrap the show quicker. But this one, people still sticked around, and probably because it's weekend. So yeah, thank you everybody who sticked around on the chat. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you also to my Patreon supporters, Puncture, Jeff, Paul, John, Poptit, Jakob Pamulski, and El Topo for helping me keep on doing Mystery Demoscene Theater 9000. And see you guys all again on the 4th of October, where we'll have another Mystery Demoscene Theater 9000. We don't have all 3 guests confirmed just yet, so I probably will not announce them now. But, you know, mark it on your calendars. It will be on a Wednesday again. So, not that good for you guys from the US, but you can check it out on YouTube later on. And, yeah. So,
Cool.
bye-bye, everyone. Take care. See you
All
next
right,
time.
see ya.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.